Good morning. I will call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Today is October 17th, 2023. I'd like to welcome everyone. Madam Clerk, can you please start by establishing a quorum?
Ms. Karkner?
Here.
Mr. Leister?
Here.
Mr. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Kane?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Robertson?
Here.
Mr. Soyson?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
Secretary Hine?
Here.
Madam Chair, please let the record reflect that 7 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Secretary, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there are not.
Okay. So do I hear a motion for approval for the agenda that was sent to us?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for October 17.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda stands approved. With that, we will move to item 5, review and approval of minutes from September 19th.
I move we approve the minutes for the meeting held on September 19th as submitted.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes stand approved. Okay, moving right along. We will move to item 6, commission member reports. I don't have any yet, so anybody? No? No? Okay. Commissioner?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. Mr. Secretary, I believe that moves us to number 7, administrative report.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So to start, have a couple of staffing announcements. The first, unfortunately, Mr. Allman, our legal counsel, has decided to change career directions a little bit and move on to another jurisdiction. He's going to go work for Baltimore City. So wanted to express sincere thanks to him for all the work that he's done, not only for this commission, but also for our department and so on. So greatly appreciate everything he's done for the county and to wish him the best in his new career direction. So sort of a surprise for you all, but I mean, if Jim wants to say anything, put him on the spot.
No, it's been a great experience. I've really enjoyed working alongside of you and answering your questions, and I think it's just been a very good and fruitful relationship. And the Carroll County, and especially the Carroll County Planning Commission, will always have a special place in my heart moving forward. And I wish you all luck, not only in your capacity as Planning Commission members, but just in life in general. So thanks again. It's been really fun and a great learning experience. I've really enjoyed it.
You sure we can't convince you to stay?
You know, the guilt that I've been getting from this building.
We have made every effort, but so far not successful. So yes, we will definitely be missing Jim. In the interim, as the county attorney's office is looking to find a full-time replacement, Michelle Ostrander, if some of you may know her, she is a private attorney. She will be providing legal counsel for this board, this commission, in the interim. So. The other staffing announcement, this is a much more positive one. We have a new administrative assistant in our department, Ms. Janice Bond. She joined us about 2 weeks or so ago and has been learning everything comprehensive planning related. Per the, what do you call them? The rules, yes, as it were. Formally, I need to nominate Ms. Bond as the clerk of the commission, and then would ask you all to discuss and then a motion to approve her as the new clerk. And I would ask that that would be starting with our November 1st meeting.
Okay.
Works.
So looking, yeah, if you have any discussions related to Ms. Bond, but otherwise I would ask for a motion and a vote.
Do we have a motion to nominate her as the clerk?
Sure. We'll make a motion to nominate Janice Bond as the new clerk of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Carroll County.
Second?
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Can,
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, can Janice tell us a little bit about her background? And
Sure. You'd like to go up to one of the microphones over there?
you don't have to tell us where you live or anything like that.
Good morning. I actually live in this county, so I live in Hampstead. So I have been an administrator, office manager, office assistant for over 16 years with Century 21 Real Estate Center. Before that, I did accounting and office management. Started out at Social Security right out of high school as a clerk. So this is a new learning experience for me, but I'm enjoying it so far.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So she can be our secretary and do our tax returns. That's
Yes.
a great hire, Chris. Good job. Thank you very much.
Multitasking, yes.
Help us understand Social Security, too.
Yes, for some of us.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
There's a motion?
Yeah, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Janice. Good luck.
A couple more items. So our next meeting date will be November 1st. So that will be an evening meeting. It will be in person here in this room starting at 6 o'clock. And for those of you that have not been to an in-person meeting after hours, you'll come through the side door, not through the main door where the guard and check-in is. So this door will be open for you. So the following meeting will be November 14th, which will be a regular day meeting. And we will have some administrative items to cover during that meeting. So we have annual elections, so elections for chair and vice chair. So get your signs and so on for. We will be reviewing the current bylaws, and if there are any proposed changes, we can review and discuss those. We will send out the current bylaws with the meeting minutes for this meeting so that you can have them to review. And we will also be reviewing the proposed dates, meeting dates for this upcoming year. And those we will also send around with the meeting minutes for this meeting, so you can review those dates and we can make any changes to those that we agree to. So that is all that I have from an administrative perspective. Any questions for me?
I don't see any.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay.
With that, turn it over to Laura Matthias for extensions.
Thank you. Good morning. Just have one extension. One extension since the last month's meeting. It is a site plan S160018. The title of that is Liberty Road Crossing. This is down in the Taylorsville area, so it's Commissioner District 4. It is the 5th extension for this project. Y'all may remember it. It's a retail as well as a mini storage all on one lot there. That's it.
And then Randolph Mitchell with BZA hearings.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I had two BZA cases to present to the commission today. The first case being 6473. The applicant requested conditional use for a junkyard utilized for processing new truck vehicles. and multiple variances on the property located at 633 Stone Chapel Road, Suite D, Westminster. The property is zoned heavy industrial on a 10.5 acre lot. And planning staff finds this request for conditional use and variances to be consistent with the 2014 Carroll County Master Plan as amended in 2019 and would not have an adverse effect on the current use of the property and surrounding area. This case, a public hearing meeting has been set for this case for October 24th, 2023. The second case that we received was 6474, and the applicant requested a conditional use for a commercial wood processing facility and numerous variances on the property located at 3209 Hooper Road, New Windsor, Maryland. This property is zoned agriculture on a 29.77 acre lot. Planning staff finds this request for conditional use and numerous variances is inconsistent with the 2014 Carroll County Master Plan as amended in 2019 and would have an adverse effect on the surrounding residential area. The number of requested variances is contrary to a desirable balance between economic development and residential development, which is Goal 13, Item D, within Chapter 3 of the county's master plan. And a public hearing meeting has been set for October 24th to hear this case as well. Thanks, that's all I had.
Thank you. Anything else?
I don't believe we have anything other, so that's it for administrative items. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will go to the final site plan for the Hurd property. Kirsten?
What a handful today.
Aren't you glad we went electronic?
Especially for
Sure.
Most of us are.
Yes.
You can sit down, please. I do need the mouse, though. Thank you.
They look right here. Are you right here?
Okay. Good morning, Planning Commission, and everybody who has joined us today. Thank you for being here. I'm going to pull this forward here. All right. My name is Kirsten Marple. I'm with Carroll County's Development Review. I'm here before you today for the final site plan for the Hurd Property Assisted Living. That's file number S190030. I'm going to pull the PowerPoint up here and we can get started. Okay. And while I do this, if you gentlemen wouldn't mind introducing yourselves as well, please.
I'm Marty Hackett, CLSI.
Stephen Hurd. Dean Camlin, architect.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for being here as well. Okay, we have before you the final site plan for Hurd Property Assisted Living. This might look familiar to many of you. This is the fourth time, in fact, it's been before a public meeting, the third time before the Planning Commission itself. This is for final approval of this site development plan. This property is located here to the east of Westminster on the east side of Hawksville Road, on the south side of St. Paul Road, in an area that is zoned agricultural. You can see from this vicinity map that most of the properties in that surrounding area are also zoned agricultural. And as you can imagine by the size of those properties, a lot of them are farmed. In fact, there's a property to the direct northwest that is an ag pres. There's a property to the south as well that's an ag pres. So there's a lot of farms in this area and also residential houses. This property highlighted in orange is the remaining portion of a subdivision. The subdivision here is off of Buckman Road that you see to the west there. That's a new subdivision that was approved in 2019. I don't believe we have houses there yet, but the driveway is in place. This site has use of that driveway as well. There's a maintenance agreement established for it, also with the understanding of the development of this site for this purpose. So the plan for this site is that it will be developed as a five-building assisted living facility. 80 units total, 80 beds total for this site. Before I get ahead of myself and start getting into plan review, the reason we're here, like I said, is for final approval. That includes final approval for the site plan per Chapter 155, and also for the plan itself and the development for Chapter 156. That's a conditional approval, and we'll get to that at the end of this report here. So the plan, again, is for 5 buildings for 80 units total. I'm not terribly great at math. I think that's 16 units per, 16 beds per building. I will note at the top here, too, that this is a level 3 service of care facility assisted living, correct? These facilities, these dwelling units are going to be incomplete dwelling units, partial dwelling units. They won't have their own kitchen. There'll be one kitchen in each building for the residents of that building. So it's not like an apartment complex, right? It's an assisted living facility of a level 3 service of care. So the plan has gone through the review process. There's quite a review process. Like I mentioned at the top, this is the 4th public meeting it's been before, 3rd time at Planning Commission. That's because the assisted living facilities are conditional use in the agricultural zoning district. So it had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for approval to proceed through plan review. But a special condition of the assisted living facility conditional use is that it also goes to Planning Commission first for determination of the density and the site layout and the exterior design. So this project came to the Planning Commission in 2020 for the density and design review. Then it went back to the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2020 as well and was approved for the use. And then it came back here to Planning Commission in 2022 for the actual concept review once they've gotten some kinks worked out. So there have been a few citizens that have shown up in a few of those meetings over the course of time. Some of the concerns brought up by the citizens was increased traffic in the area and increased load to the wells and their wells in the area. So this plan has been reviewed in light of those concerns and has gotten through that process as well. I will also note the last time this was before the Planning Commission, there was a discussion about the parking lot. There was excess parking in the parking lot, which can be a very good thing. They have whittled the parking down just a little bit to accommodate some of the features that are required by code review. The parking is still in excess of the minimum requirements. And in addition to that, like we mentioned, this is a level 3 service of care. A lot of the residents, most likely, you're going to see the visitors and the employees using the parking lot more than anybody. So currently, like I mentioned, this was a vacant property. The development plan is to accommodate 5 residential building units and for a driveway that utilizes the existing use and common driveway there. That driveway, like I mentioned, they knew from the beginning this was going to be developing off the remaining portion. The driveway is wider than typically required by this type of subdivision. The driveway is 20 feet wide, and that's with the anticipation of accommodating this use, and in particular, the potential need for emergency service vehicles coming down that driveway. So the driveway is 20 feet wide and goes all the way to the road that way. And you come into the parking lot. Like I mentioned, they have excess parking here. The code requirement was for 30 stalls by code, which bases it off of the number of beds and the number of employees, and that total came to 30 stall requirement. They're still providing 53 stalls. It's quite in excess of the minimum requirement there for parking. Here's a little bit of a closer view here. You can see around the outside of the parking area as well. This was not on the plan previously. They have included a sidewalk that goes all the way around the full oval there to connect all the buildings together, and also sidewalk that connects with crosswalks to the center ellipse there, where there's a landscaped gazebo and an open grassy area as well. This was reviewed per ADA requirements as well, and all of the walkways and paths and doors and so on will meet ADA requirements. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We'll go here. 2 signs are proposed. There's one sign proposed at the end of the driveway itself where it meets Hawksville Road. There's also a driveway right where there's also a sign, a directory sign, right where the driveway opens up to the parking lot area. My understanding, these are both wood, and neither of them will be illuminated. Just wood signs there for finding the sites. The buildings themselves are going to look kind of residential in style, similar to, if you're familiar with the intersection of Route 32 and 97 down by the college, there's 2 assisted living facility buildings there, similar design to that. These will all match each other. There'll be a white siding with black roofs, gabled windows and porches in the back, and I believe in the front as well. The site itself will be screened with plenty of landscaping, as you can see, or a lot of landscaping, I should say, as you can see from this rendering here. Landscaping essentially along the full perimeter with gaps to allow for maintenance vehicles. There's some areas in the northeast where you don't see landscaping. That's because there's forest conservation there, so there will be trees in those locations. But there'll also be, again, landscaping around the perimeter of the site as well as around the perimeter of the parking area and in the parking lots. I guess we can see it on this page here, too. You can see here on the northwestern side and the southwestern side and the southeastern side and in the north, there's septic systems and wells throughout the site. That's because there's one well and one septic system required for each building. Each building essentially is assessed separately, and they all require their own facilities. The health department has approved this plan, and when they move forward to build these, they'll have to build each well and septic system for each respective building. On a similar note to water and sewer, there's also tanks that will be in front of the building, I believe below ground tanks for fire suppression. You can see them pretty well here between the buildings and the parking lot. There'll be underground water tanks there. Each building will be sprinklered to meet the requirements of fire protection. So again, the buildings will be sprinklered for fire protection, and the driveway has been modified to exceed minimum requirements in order to anticipate and accommodate potential servicing by emergency services and fire protection. And that has been all approved by our fire protection reviewer. Stormwater management, of course, you probably saw from this view as well. There are pipes running throughout the site. There are microbiome retention facilities, like little wet ponds, or dry ponds essentially, or rain ponds, rain gardens, that's the word I'm looking for. Microbiome retention facilities throughout the site that connect and drain and discharge to a larger dry pond style on the northeast up by the forest conservation area as well, to meet all of the final requirements for stormwater management. Water resource management, floodplain weren't applicable here, but forest conservation, grading, landscaping have all been approved. So I think that's it for the plan layout itself. The staff recommends Chapter 155 approval with the conditions that a public works agreement be established, forest conservation easement be recorded, stormwater maintenance easement and maintenance agreement be recorded, as well as a landscape maintenance agreement. And of course, if this were to change in the future, those plans would come back to the Planning Commission for review and approval. So that brings us to, unless anybody had any questions about the site design, to concurrency management, or I can just get through this and then we can get to the conversation.
I just have one question.
Yes.
I noticed there's a parcel of land that, that goes out to St. Paul Road. Is that an entrance and an exit?
So that's actually on the forest conservation plan, and it's going to be fully covered with forest conservation. There will be no access in that location. In fact, access will be completely restricted. There's actually a stream that runs through there that makes access difficult to begin with, which is why they're utilizing the using common driveway.
Okay,
So that will all be under forest conservation. We'll have little trees there for now and a nice little forest there eventually.
So that's not a street? Or-
Correct. There's nothing, it's just open grass right now. Yeah. You wouldn't even know it's there if you were on the ground looking at it. So they're just going to be utilizing the Buckman Road, the Buckman Drive, the use of common driveway that connects to Hawksville Road. The connection to St. Paul Road will be fully in forest conservation.
And the homes that are existing there on Hawksville Road, Are they homes that have come off of this property previously?
So I can't speak to that in particular, no, okay. The homes off of Buckman Road will be homes that came off of this property in the past. That subdivision in the front that happened in 2019, that's the division this property has been involved with previously. Okay. We'll move on to concurrency management. Again, this would be for conditional approval, concurrency management. I'm going to read through some section of the code here because assisted living facilities like this, where they're not complete dwelling units with its own kitchen, bathing area, and living area, they're treated a little bit differently to recognize that they're not just a regular single-family home. So it does say residential site plans are applicable to the requirements of Chapter 156, which is adequate public facilities and concurrency management. The site plan is for approval of 80 assisted living units. And in accordance with Chapter 156, a dwelling unit is defined as a single unit providing complete independent living facilities. The code defines multi-unit residential development units that do not contain complete dwelling units as equivalent dwelling units. The calculation to convert to dwelling unit is as follows. For the first 8 occupants, 1 dwelling unit, and for every 3 occupants after the first 8, 1 additional dwelling unit. So in accordance with that section of the code that's applicable to this particular type of use, this 80 assisted living unit beds would convert to 25 equivalent dwelling units, which is generally a single-family dwelling. So that's the way this project was reviewed. That's the way all these types of projects, when it's assisted living without complete dwelling units, is reviewed. So this was gone through the process of adequacy testing with certain key sections like road adequacy, fire EMS adequacy, police services, and so on. Again, it's assisted living, so it doesn't need to do schools. There is no school component involved with the assisted living facility. So this went through the process and was sent to the various agencies. Police services were adequate. Fire and medical services. Fire and medical are looked at in one big group, but they are 2 separate metrics there. So fire response and fire response, late and no response times or percentages were approaching inadequate, as was the fire response time was also approaching inadequate. EMS response and response time was adequate. Roads, Hawksville Road is rated adequate as well. So the recommendation is that police, emergency services, water, sewer services, and roads are considered adequate, that fire is approaching inadequate, however, that no modification to the building permit reservation occur for this with 25 equivalent dwelling units. Typically, if a result is approaching inadequate, a reservation for building permits can be modified to accommodate for that. This is 25 equivalent dwelling units, and it's not recommended that that is modified for this, and that a conditional approval be granted for this project for concurrency management, Chapter 156. So I didn't go into all the numbers here. I didn't want to get too number-oriented here. But if anybody had any questions, I can certainly answer those for this. Or for the site plan layout as well. We can just take a look at everything.
Question, with 25 dwelling units, what's the water usage going to be?
So the well and septic is looked at by the health department, and they have approved this plan. As I mentioned, the health department looks at this as independent buildings. These will be condominium lots, essentially, and they look at them independently. I don't get the exact numbers of water usage, but they have approved the plans, again, each with their own individual wells.
Well, I know from a state standpoint, if you have to use more than 10,000 gallons a day, you got to have a permit, because I have 5 of them myself I have to deal with. And I would think there'd be way more than 10,000 gallons a day.
Yeah,
And it's not a whole lot of land recovery there unless they put a deed on something else for that amount of water on one property.
Actually, I think in this case, I reread the notes from before, and it was 5,000 gallons a day before special permits were required. So, and I was going to ask the same question, Matt. on that same topic. We don't see the specifics from the health department on how they came up with their approval, or?
No, the well plan is separate. Now, this shows the wells, this shows the septics, but they have different metrics that they send. Just like with stormwater management gets a report this thick that I don't read, it's similar to water as well, well and septic to the health department.
And the state still has some guidelines, I believe. So,
The health department would handle anything that goes
Right.
through the state with health department matters.
right, knowing a little bit about assisted living, we don't tend to, surprisingly, have a lot of water usage.
Was your question clarified?
No, not really.
Okay, I just, it's a little over 5,000 gallons in aggregate. And that's one of the reasons why we did individual systems, to keep them smaller. The permitting process is different. It's handled locally. And you have, a lot more flexibility on developing it because you're only doing it section by section. So anyway, if that helps clarify it. If this were 6,000, 7,000 gallons in one system, we'd be going through a different process, and stuff. So anyway, did that help?
I suppose, I mean, what's the average regular dwelling unit use if you're figuring it up when you're building a house?
Yeah, unfortunately,
250 gallons a day, roughly.
Okay.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Mr. Hurd, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I think that it's really been well-reviewed, and even some of the details you just presented have been worked out to beyond my expectations. So, I'm very pleased with how this is all moving forward.
Will you be running these?
At this point, my boys and I are planning on putting something together. The details are still being worked out for exactly how we'll be running it. My oldest son has a lot of administrative experience, so that's where we're going to start.
Mr. Cantlin?
I'm here to answer any architectural questions.
Madam Chair, Chris, if I may, so just to clarify, the development review process that, and in this case Kirsten, has led this project through, subjects these projects to a lot of technical reviews by a variety of agencies. In this case, related to water, that the technical agency that we rely on is the state in the form of the Carroll County Health Department. So they review this completely for water usage, septic, and so on, to make sure that it complies with all state requirements related to those state codes. So we don't necessarily have all of the details, the nitty-gritty technical details, but we have to rely on the state agency that's responsible for this, that they have reviewed and approved this.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Anybody else?
The undeveloped lots, I guess they're coming off of Lockman Road. Is it a total of 5 or 7?
It's 5.
5.
5 recorded lots.
Okay. And any timeline for those to be developed?
Obviously it's developed. The road's in, the grading's done and all that. It's pretty much stabilized. The good news is that the Hurd family, they owned it, so they were able to control it throughout the process of going from a 12-foot driveway that was originally approved to expanding it to a 20-foot quasi-commercial type driveway to meet the entrance criteria and all. So now that that's done, they're free to move on, and they don't have to worry about a lot of dealings with individual neighbors at that point.
Yeah, and that was my other question, I guess. So that expansion of the width is all the way out to Hawksville Road?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's not a county road?
It is not privately maintained.
As I mentioned a long time ago, it was a long time ago at this point, the beginning of the report, the driveway, again, it's existing, the subdivision is complete as far as recording goes, and that means that the driveway acts as easement. The use in common driveway maintenance obligations document is also recorded by deed, and I believe it pretty clearly specifies the users, a number of users that the remaining portion can use it, and that everybody's in some part responsible for, and potentially more responsible. I can't recall the exact language it was using in the deed that you guys put together. But neighbors moving in would be aware that this is what this is if they were to read the documents supplied to them. And I'm sure there'll be some discussions during sale and all that, since you own them.
Level 3 assisted care, as I recall, as the numbers go up from 1 to whatever, the level of care becomes more intensive. Is that right? Do I have that backwards? Is 1 the highest, or is 3's pretty high? Is that right?
It's skilled care.
Yeah.
Though this specific setting is, there'll be medical assistants,
Okay.
primarily caring for the patients.
All right, so I guess.
They are relatively independent still.
Mhm.
You know, it's not like they're bedridden.
Okay.
In a setting where they're actually bedridden, they would, well, there's systems set up with hospice care and whatnot that all come together to allow for the quality of care that you're providing.
I guess some of the emails that we received, because we have had some noise around this, centered around what the facility would be doing from a security standpoint to prevent people from, who might have dementia, who might be confused, from, wandering around and through the neighborhood and being an issue. For people who have lived there for a period of time, can you address that for us as a commission and for anybody here, maybe here with those same concerns?
I think the first point to bring up is the safety of the patients is
Mhm.
primary.
Right.
So, in the event that there would be issues with mental function, that may not be appropriate setting for them to even be admitted there. There are also memory care units, and again, the details haven't been put together yet, but there very well may be one of our buildings would be a memory care unit, and under that setting, there's more security to make sure they aren't allowed to wander out of the unit and onto and get lost, frankly.
Right.
I don't think they're dangerous,
Right.
but they could get lost,
No, that's a
certainly,
concern, yeah.
in their own personal harm, so, yeah.
So is any part of this drug rehab? Is that part of the facility?
No, this is not drug
It's
rehab,
not.
this is
So it's
just
for
assisted care.
Elder care or special needs problems?
Right.
Okay.
Stephen?
No. So
Commissioner Gorton?
the only other comment I would make is, we see the need for a facility like this for sure, especially a newer facility for this. And it looks like a nice setting, it looks like it's well-designed. But, we're just going over the questions that the public has about the water usage and stuff like that. I think that's what, those two things are their biggest concern, I believe.
I think we have to rely on the health department, but personally, I can say, I live in a neighborhood, and years back, I guess somebody built some houses and they tapped it into my aquifer. So, it does have a difference, but that is all taken into consideration when the health department looks at that and sees everything. So,
I could comment on that. I don't know the details, but on a previous meeting that we had here, that was originally raised. And there just happened to be a gentleman that was a water expert in the room. and described the water flow in that area and said the aquifers, where the street is, where the homes are, has a different aquifer than we would have on the other side of this hill, because if you look at the contour, it's going down away from the Hauksville Road where the residents that are currently there are present, those homes. So I don't know the details of that, but he actually did comment in a previous meeting for this plan.
Yeah, that was actually in the TRC meeting, I believe, back in 2019. The representative for the health department was here, present for that meeting, anticipating these kind of questions and comments, and was able to speak, did his research before he got here, and was able to speak to that at that meeting.
I was surprised about that, yeah.
He didn't just pull it out of a hat, he definitely knew, yeah, anticipated. Yes, yep.
And I think those questions are very pertinent, because with that kind of water usage, I think you understand it, a lot of it's based on a water recharge area. So when the city expands, like Westminster, they always look at the water recharge area. And so when you have a significant development like this, it's a real concern based on the houses around it and the depth of the wells of the existing homes. So when you tap a water usage of 5,000 gallons a day or 10,000 gallons a day, whatever it might be, the existing wells then sometimes suffer. So I think you may understand why this is a real concern for the people around. Some of those older homes might have shallower wells, and then what happens? So this is a real concern when you're talking about the area and where the aquifers are and how it works.
And I don't have a map that shows it, unfortunately, but I mentioned at the top as well that there are a few properties in this area that are under preservation agreements.
Yes.
In particular, the property is kind of nestled in the crook of this one to the northwest there. That's in AgPres. There's a property to the south. I don't think it's the one immediately adjacent to the south, but there's a property just to the south that's also in Ag. So there's a lot of property in this area that's preserved from the encroachment of the town or for future development that will be essentially permanent recharge areas to benefit the entire area.
Some of those easements, I don't think any there were, but some of the easements that were written in the last 10, 15 years had water recharge elements in those easements. I don't think any of these do. Just a comment.
Any further comments? Okay, I will open it to the public, and before I do, I just want to remind everybody that you must have signed in order to make public comment. You must talk into the microphone to facilitate audio and video recording. Comments will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Citizen testimony is not a question and answer session. Questions may be directed to staff after the meeting. If any individual fails to comply with these rules, the Planning and Zoning Commission Chair may call the person out of order and may require him or her to leave the meeting. So with that, I welcome anybody to come forward.
Hi.
Morning.
My name is Brittany Mitchell. I live at 109 South Hawksville Road. My property backs right up against where they're planning on building. So I appreciate you guys for addressing the water situation. And what I would like to just say, my well is right at the front of my property. At this point, I have been told the only areas that I can drill is at the back of my property. So that is a big concern Because while they're saying that it's different aquifers, what's going to happen when I have to go back up to the back of my property? Because all I have is a long, narrow property, or I have to go beg my neighbors to let me drill on theirs. That is a big concern of us. You guys already addressed the safety, and I appreciate it. And I think that's about all I have right now. I had a whole bunch of other stuff, but you addressed many of them. My questions were not completely answered, but obviously there's not much to do.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other comments?
My name's Alan Hughes. I live at 3501 St. Paul Road. It'd be the property with the path going out to St. Paul next to it. In all honesty, that property, even in this picture, has been within the fence line and maintained by the property owner. I've been there for the past 4 years. The previous property owner maintained it. This morning's information that it would become part of this approval is put into a forestry preserve and have trees put on it. And we're already losing enough ag land with the rest of this development. I wouldn't want to see this approval force a strip of trees put in for no good reason. I also have water concerns, being the house at the bottom of that hill. I had to put a new septic in last year. The only place we could get the perk was up in the very top corner, right next to where this development is. If I had to do the same thing on a well and go closer to this property, it'd be an additional drag on that aquifer. So I do have water concerns. We've already burnt up in the 4 years I've been there, 2 pumps where the water levels will drop to the point where it was sucking mud in and burnt the pumps up. So anything that's going to negatively impact water at that location is obviously going to be a problem for me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, then the charge before us is to make an approval for this property. Anybody
For a
want to
motion?
tackle?
Sure. I'll make a motion. I guess there's 2 for chapter.
Correct.
155 and 156. Start with 155. I'll make a motion that we approve pursuant to chapter 155, the staff recommendations, the 5 staff recommendations. I won't read them individually. For the S190030 Hurd Property Assisted Living Project.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstain? Any, I'm sorry, Richard?
As an alternate, I don't vote.
Okay. So any other, do we get, right, thank you.
Do you want to do a roll call, just in case?
Do we need a roll call, do you think?
We do not need one, but we certainly can if you wish. Were there any oppositions?
I
I did
did not see any.
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Okay. No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Then, did we do all in favor? Yes, okay, thank you. That stands approved, so we can go to chapter 156.
And if I could, before you move on to that, chapter 156 in the report, I copied and pasted wrong. That should be conditional approval because of fire being approaching inadequate. Fire is not inadequate. Fire is approaching inadequate, so it needs to be a conditional approval, just recognizing that.
Okay, so if I'm correct, then before the permit is issued, that would have to be proved that it is adequate?
So for subdivisions, which is we typically would see for Chapter 156, the way that we're seeing it now, that would be true of subdivision because you'd go through your final plan review. You would be having this discussion at preliminary. But for site plan, there is no preliminary stage. It's just the final stage. So it essentially would just be conditional approval, recognizing that it's approaching inadequate, and no restrictions to the permits that are pooled. Because again, this is 25 equivalent dwelling units. There's really not much that would be beneficial for restricting that. However, I will note for fire response time in particular, and EMS response time, which is was not an issue in this case. EMS was fine, was adequate. Fire time and response was approaching inadequate. I will note that very recently, in the past year and a half, the county has stepped into fire and EMS, and it is now a county-managed situation with county staff and paid staff as opposed to volunteers. So the numbers we're looking at now are a 2-year time period where most of that time period was not the case. And I will say there's a reason the county stepped in and established this system, this new system. So we're going to start seeing these numbers. The idea is these numbers will start improving once we're out of this 2-year period and we're looking mostly at the county numbers. So it's very likely by the time that these permits are starting to be pooled, because again, the house permits aren't even pooled yet, so there's no saying exactly when all this will happen. It's very likely that we're looking at a higher number at that time, but because it's not the same as a subdivision, it's not treated exactly the same way. So it would just be conditional approval that they can pool the permits.
Okay.
Understanding that it was approaching inadequate for fire.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Who said you?
Who said that? So there's as part of the motion, there's no recordation schedule and building permit reservation. That's not part of this.
Correct. That would be unrestricted, yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can I dig a little deeper on that?
Of course.
Are these in staged events, or is this gonna be a one-time build all of them at once, or, I mean, so if the fire is inadequate now?
Approaching.
Or approaching.
It is not inadequate, it's approaching, yes.
Approaching. The time frame for the build-out, when would the fire be adequate if everything falls into place with the EMS and the fire and the county?
Again,
What's the time frame on this?
It's depending on financing, so exactly how we're going to do that is still in the planning stages.
Well,
Anticipating one building at a time right now, just
Okay.
because of financials with the interest rates.
Yeah, I understand. I do understand that.
And aren't they limited to the building permit number too?
well, it would still be 50 dwelling units in a year, but again, we're at 25 because of the equivalent dwelling unit. So theoretically, if you had all the money in the world, you could build all the buildings all in 1 year. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the way this is going to go right now, but it's 25 equivalent dwelling units. The permit reservation would typically be 50 dwelling units. We're below that threshold already.
Okay. Okay. You got that? Okay. Who would like to make a motion?
I'll try. Yeah. I need Chris's assistance. All right, so I'll make a motion that we conditionally approve the final residential site plan of the S190030 Hurd property, given that fire is approaching inadequacy. Does that work?
Sure, yeah, for chapter 156.
Per 156.
Pursuant to 156.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Any further comments? Any abstentions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. You are approved as read. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Okay. Next one is Bradley's Overlook. Mr. Beecroft, you are up.
How are you? How you doing?
And I see
Taking a client's place.
Rob Scranton today.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As mentioned, David Beecraft with the Bureau of Development Review. I'm before you with the next project on the agenda, which I believe is the last one we will talk about today, which is for Bradley's Overlook. File number P-18-0063. What this project is proposing is the creation of 4 residential lots. With me are a couple representatives for the project. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Linda Alexander with CLSI, the engineer.
Marty Hackett with CLSI as well. Client was unable to make it today due to some unforeseen reasons, and I'm sort of taking his place.
Okay. Thank you.
So this project is before you as a preliminary plan, and as such, we will be looking for 2 actions today. First one will be approval of the preliminary plan in accordance with Chapter 155, and then approval of the preliminary plan and pursuant to Chapter 156, which is concurrency management. So similar to the last project, this project has been before the Planning and Zoning Commission numerous times, but for those who are unfamiliar, this project is down in the Eldersburg area off of Cherry Tree Lane, and it is, can't really see the mouse here. It is essentially highlighted off of Cherry Tree Lane, and you can see that a lot of the area surrounding it is zoned conservation, with a little bit of area that's abutting it zoned agriculture. So the property itself currently is undeveloped. It is zoned conservation, and it is on the west side of Cherry Tree Lane. Cherry Tree Lane is a county-maintained roadway. The property is mostly wooded. As you can see, there is some open space here on the northeast portion of it, and that was previously an equestrian center. The property does have quite a significant contour change on it, so you do see the stream that runs through the middle of the property. From that stream outwards and both ways, it increases in elevation. So as you go towards the stream, you go downhill, and then as you go away from the stream, you go further uphill. And that is roughly in approximately 130 vertical feet of elevation change. So adjacent to the property are, all those properties are zoned conservation or agriculture. Many, as you can see, are developed with single-family dwellings, and along with farmland as well. The property lies outside of the water and sewer service area, so all the properties surrounding this property, including this property, would be and are served by well and septic systems. So what's currently being proposed, as mentioned, is 4 additional residential dwellings or residential lots on the property. So it does get a little confusing with the drawing because there are some simultaneous processes going on. So I don't want to touch on it too much, but just for your own information, there are 4 lots proposed down towards Cherry Tree Lane. And then further back, there are 2 what's called off-conveyance lots that are being created as well. So those off-conveyance lots are going through a separate process, but when everything is said and done on this property, including a home on the leftover land, there will be 7 homes in total. So this subdivision is creating 4. There are 2 off-conveyance lots, and then the leftover land, the resulting land, will be buildable. So the property or the project itself was initially submitted on March 25th, 2019. It did go before the technical review committee meeting, which was the month after. And it should be noted that the project was submitted prior to the conservation zoning change that occurred in 2019, or in 2022, I mean. So the code that was in place at the time is how this project is being reviewed. The project did go, as mentioned, to the technical review committee meeting. At that time, there were a few citizens that expressed their concerns of stormwater management, runoff, and soil erosion. These adjoining property owners, one who spoke at the meeting, also emailed and mailed their concerns in reference to some of those environmental concerns that they had, and I believe that they are also here this morning. October 20th, 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission were presented the concept plan of subdivision. There were no citizens at that meeting. I believe that was a virtual meeting, so that may have been the reason why. Sometime thereafter, the developer and engineer of the project had changed, and thus the design of the project had changed as well to what you see now. More recently, earlier this year, on May 16th, the Planning and Zoning Commission were presented a proposed cluster plan. So they wanted the authorization to cluster and put all of those lots on the northeastern portion of the property where it was currently open and not wooded. During that meeting, it was mentioned that this will have minimal environmental impacts compared to the previous design, and the Planning and Zoning Commission decided that they would like to authorize the clustering of the project. So with that, there hasn't really been much change since that design. In fact, if we kind of zoom in on those lots here, so those 4 new residential lots are going to be served by a private driveway. It is named Kennard Drive. That driveway placement was placed in the most ideal portion of the property. So because of the contours of the road, they did have to get a site distance variance from the Department of Public Works. That variance was approved. It was deemed that this driveway is in the most optimal position on the roadway. And so the lots themselves that they are creating are ranging from 1 3/4 acres to just over 2 acres. And that leaves the resulting land after those other off conveyances are removed at being 27 1/4 acres of land. And that resulting land, because of it housing that stream that cuts through the property, it will be encompassed by various easements that are going to be granted to the county. So forest conservation easement, water resource easement, as well as a floodplain easement as well. And that will limit what can be done on that resulting land property in the future. So the land that's derived from clustering, so whenever you cluster the lots, you're not only putting them all together, but you're also reducing the lot size in reference to what is code required. That change in lot size, so in conservation zoning, the acreage has to be at least 3 acres. Because they're clustering, they are moving down to, like I mentioned, 1 3/4 acres up to 2 acres. That difference of land has to be set aside to benefit those residents, and that is done by way of an open space area. In this case, an open space easement is going to be placed on the resulting land, which is going to be to the left of where those proposed lots are. So it's going to be not a separate parcel, but essentially an easement that will give the residents of the community the rights to utilize that area. And so with that, Stormwater Management has issued preliminary approval of the plan. Stormwater Management will be addressed by way of dry wells for the individual homes, as well as bioswales to meet the requirements. Grading and Sediment Control has approved the plan. As mentioned, Forest Conservation, Water Resources, and Floodplain have all approved the plan. They will each need easements on the property. Landscape has granted approval of the plan. All lots will utilize private well and septic systems, and the health department has deemed the information provided to them adequate, so they have approved the plan as well. And all remaining review agencies have also approved this plan as presented before you. In the review, the Bureau of Comprehensive Planning determined that the proposed plan is consistent with the 2018 Freedom Community Comprehensive Plan land use designation of resource conservation, as well as the 2019 Water and Sewer Master Plan. So with that, pursuant to Chapter 155, staff recommends approval pursuant to the following conditions, and I'm going to read through what these conditions are. So there are 12 conditions. The first one is that the owner-developer enters into a public works agreement that will essentially bond all that necessary improvements to the county. That a declaration of maintenance obligations for the use in common driveway, which as mentioned is Kennard Drive, be recorded with the record plat. That the parcel shown as parcel A, which is going to be deeded to the county essentially for road widening and maintenance. So the county looks for 30 foot from right-of-way to ensure that we have adequate space to maintain the roadways. So that parcel is to be deeded to the county. That a stormwater management easement and maintenance agreement be deeded to the county as well. A landscape maintenance agreement shall be deeded to the county. A forested water resource protection easement be deeded. That a forest conservation easement be deeded. That a floodplain easement be granted. That an open space conservation easement be recorded. That a drainage and utility easement be recorded. And that any changes to the preliminary plan as submitted and approved shall be resubmitted if any changes shall occur. And the last one is something that we've more recently started adding as a condition. It's nothing new. It's always been in the code, but we figured it'd be beneficial to add it as a condition for information for all parties. And that is that the preliminary plan approval shall become void 24 months after the date of written approval, unless such plan has received final approval by the Planning Commission and has been recorded as a plat and land records of Carroll County, or that an extension has been approved by the Director of Planning and Land Management for recordation of the subdivision plat. So with that, before I move on to the next portion of this report, which is concurrency management, were there any questions in reference to anything thus far?
As I remember before, they had the, 4 lots on this portion of it.
Right.
Plus the remainder. And then the other 2 houses were off to the, what is it, the south side or?
Right.
The other side. And so now we have them all clustered on the hill, everything.
Correct, yeah. So with the change in the developer, it was decided that it wasn't beneficial to have all the lots sparse like that. And I believe that was a monetary reason behind that, as well as an environmental reason behind that as well. So that they want to remove themselves from those environmental features and try to utilize that area that's currently open and not forested. I believe they are going to encroach in the forested area briefly, but the majority of it should be in that unencumbered area.
So the rest of it will all be open space.
No. So there is going to be a portion of open space easement, but the rest of it will be owned privately. And even the open space easement area will be owned privately, but the easement area will allow those other residents to utilize that area as they see fit, as necessary.
But there won't be any more lot rights.
Correct. Yeah, this will exhaust all lot rights.
That shows all the houses there, even on the remainder. Okay.
Everything else will be in an easement. All that remaining woods will not be impacted, as it was originally shown with that huge driveway, all gone. Everything's in one location, clustered. All that environmental, all that woods comes into an easement to the county.
So wait, I need to understand this first for a moment. So we're allowing this developer to cluster these homes. The open space that's being created is going to be owned by someone else, and these people will have an easement to use that, but someone else is retaining the ownership of it. Is that correct?
So someone else will retain the ownership of that land underneath of it. That's correct. So how it's written in our code is that you essentially have 3 options. The first option is to provide it to the county. So the county has the right of first refusal.
Okay.
We decided we don't want that area. So they were left with 2 other options, one of them being to separate it off as a parcel or to have an easement on one of the lots, so that whatever area was required would have been utilized under an easement, and that's the route they decided to go with.
Okay.
So I want,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay, give me a break.
I'd like to dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, go with it.
You listed 12 different stipulations and easements. My concern here, I'm sure you have an answer for this, but Who maintains all this? It seems like there are a lot of moving pieces here, so who maintains the open space area? If there's a forest, is there, this is a wooded area also, right?
Correct.
So who maintains this? I mean, who monitors it, who maintains it, and who's responsible for the upkeep of all these easements? It's a lot of stuff here going on.
Sure. So that's kind of a two-answer question. So any easements that are going to be granted to the county, so the floodplain, the water resources, and the forest conservation, those will be regularly inspected to verify that everything that's outlined within that deed of easement is within compliance. Typically, within areas like this, the requirements are no disturbance. You're not allowed to disturb much, if anything, within those easement areas. So that's how those will be maintained. Is essentially they won't be. They would just be inspected regularly to make sure that how everything is currently is how it is in the future. The open space easement and other easements that will be private. So those other easements would be the drainage and utility easement. That's going to be a private easement. Those are maintained privately. If it's decided that the community would like to utilize that open space easement and they want to, say, build a jungle gym or something like that that's outside of the county easements, then that can be done by just going through the permitting process and not having to make any changes to that easement.
Controlled by the existing, or by the future landowners of the housing units.
Yeah, I believe this will be under an HOA, is that
Be
correct?
a homeowner association formed to do this. Okay. So then if the remaining portion is sold off to another landowner, the next landowner then is responsible for maintaining any easements that are on that remaining portion.
They would be on the hook, essentially. They would own that land, and so they would be the ones to ensure that there's no disturbance in the county easements and ensure that anything that's outlined within those other easements are within compliance on their property. That's right.
Here's where I have a problem, and this is just historic on some things that I was working on. If that land ever changes ownership, and the people who are supposed to be maintaining those easements, it should be some way in the transfer of that property as a requirement that the next landowner should sit down, understand the easements with the county, and move forward. I've had this happen in a previous capacity I was in, that if the next landowner does not understand all these stipulations, we got problems. And so I don't know what kind of procedure there is when land changes hands. Maybe you can answer this, sir.
I will do my best.
Okay.
So
where I'm going with this.
I do, absolutely. So whenever a property changes hands, actually, first of all, let me back up. So the county easements, they run with the land, which is just legal, that it just stays with the land. It doesn't matter who owns it. It stays on the land. So when there's a transfer of property, those easements have been recorded, and there's a sort of legal fiction that once an easement or anything is recorded in the land records of Carroll County, it is assumed legally that everyone in the world knows about it. Now, coming to these sort of specifics of a land transfer, normally the easements that are running with the land would be in the deed that the new owner would be privy to and should know about. There's not a sort of county requirement that be an issue. It's just because it's recorded legally, they are on notice and they know, while practically they might not, but legally everyone in the world, if something is recorded, is supposed to know about the easements on that property.
Yeah, you used a very important word there, and you said assume. And I worry about assume.
I understand, but that's the way property law in this country works, unfortunately.
I needed to put that on the table for everyone to understand, because I don't want to put any more burden on the county in these type of situations and agreements than possible, because it takes man hours, it takes a lot of work to right a wrong that happens when you put this many stipulations on property that someone else owns, and the property owners then who bought those houses and those lots assume that it's gonna be carried out. So they're the things that I worry about with these 12 different stipulations here, and I understand why they're put in there, believe me, I understand that. I just want to question, you know, the next step, so that the county then don't have to step in time after time after time when things aren't put together properly.
Yeah, but Ralph, it's great to hear you say what you're saying, and Jim, you just keep giving. I am going to use the term legal fiction probably once a meeting, going forward. That is, it's there. Linda, Marty, y'all relax. Y'all are going to be fine on this. My problem is, and Laura's, the higher you go on your forehead, the more worried you are. So she's getting wound up. My issue here is, and again, I know I need therapy. Jim, you don't have to deal with it. Chris, I'll be upstairs and I'll lie on the floor and you can help me out. My issue here is with clustering and how we are doing it, because in my view, and Ralph is hitting the nail on the head. In my view, we're allowing the developer to do something here that is beneficial to him because the infrastructure is not as great. It's beneficial to the county too, because we don't have to maintain as much road, we don't have to plow it. Not as many linear feet of road, not as many linear feet of water, sewer, if there's water lines are running down the road. I get clustering and I understand it. My issue is the outcome is not what we were promised as a community. And we're ending up here with a convoluted open space where, the HOA is not maintaining it. And again, I'm not dressing you down. This is fine. If that's the way y'all want to do it, that's fine. I think going forward, though, the outcome needs to be there is an open space with a purpose, a definite purpose. And it's not just some field. It's not just, I love trees. I put 51 in my own yard. I am all for trees. And I'm fine with a wooded area, but there ought to be a path running through it. There ought to be something that benefits the community if we allow the developer to do this. I'm extremely frustrated with how we are applying the cluster designation in this county. It doesn't seem like the outcomes are generating anything that relieves pressure on our commission to provide additional park space. This is an opportunity. And we're losing an opportunity to create an area that could potentially benefit more people. And so that's my frustration. I'm wound up. I'll get off my soapbox one more time. I don't think, we're far enough along with this. If this is the way the developer wants to do it. I think as a county, though, David, as we work through with developers in the future in terms of clustering, I think our expectations are higher here when we allowed this. And when we were told as a community, this is a good thing, allow us to do this. Let us show you what we can do. I'm seeing it, and it's not really producing much for those of us who live in an area that's just becoming more and more congested. I feel better. Laura, are you okay?
Can I just,
She's not.
I'll say one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been doing this for 38 years, okay? I'm going to date myself. There was a time, and this has nothing to do with this job, that when we clustered, the resulting area became open space that the county automatically took. So there's a lot of parkland around that the county has acquired, and there wasn't nearly the amount of easements that went on it to that point. At some point, the county made a decision about 10, 15 years ago, they didn't want the land. So they switched the cluster. And the developer, obviously on this case, it was atrocious to go into those woods and tear woods out to put two houses back there in this massive driveway. It is a much less environmental impact of what we're showing. The difference is the open space area and that entire piece of land that has all the woods and the easements and everything that leads almost directly into Liberty Reservoir was offered to the county, and the county said they didn't want it. Therefore, we as the developer and the engineer have no choice but to add that plethora of easements on it to protect that land.
Right.
And those easements do not allow for pathways to go through them, horses to go through them to get to the trails that are down along Liberty Reservoir.
Okay.
That's my soapbox, okay? So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and
Yeah,
we're
that-
trying to do the best we can, given the fact that, you know, that those regulations have changed, and we're trying to keep that environmental impact as little as possible.
Mr. Hackett, I'm not picking on you. I think this just needs to be brought to the surface. So are these easements, are they bonded?
They're not, as far as bonded goes, the easements are gonna be recorded on the record plats, and they're gonna run with title of each of the properties. Whether it's a drainage utility easement, whether it's a forest protection easement, whether it's a water resource protection easement, whatever they are, they run with the title of the land. And the easement's still recorded even for the open space easement, it's on the resulting land parcel. And the reality here is, and you mentioned to serve more of the public in, you know, with the parkland or whatever. In this case, if you didn't cluster,
Okay.
you'd have somebody owning all that woodland with no open space easement, and the only person that would benefit from the woods would be the person that owns the property.
That's true.
In this case, there at least, it's an easement that meets the zoning code. And in this case also, you have a 100% basically wooded with a big stream valley that it's gonna allow the people to walk into the woods and go visit the stream and all that stuff as much as they do, because it's pretty overgrown.
Okay.
It's not like, so the cluster in this case, instead of going in, as Linda said, clearing out a bunch of trees, putting a long driveway, more paving, big culvert and all across the stream and impacting that, to then go ahead and replant the same amount of acreage of trees that you had to clear in other agricultural land area that's cleared, and the trees are only about this big and about that big around.
Right.
So we preserve them. So that was really in this case, and everyone's case by case. I mean,
Right.
these projects, when it comes to conservation and agricultural subdivisions in the county, since Senate Bill 236 took place in 2013, I believe, we're basically 7 lots on a bigger piece of property. In this case, it was 4 lots, 2 off conveyances, and a remaining piece. There's no real big, you don't see the Shaladons anymore, the River Downs, where you have golf courses in the open space like Shaladon.
Right.
Yeah, so, this is one where it was just an environmental friendly plan versus what was done previously. Yes, my client, our client is saving money, not building a huge culvert, not extending the driveway an extra 1,000, 1,500 feet to get back to the other side of the stream. And we did it, met all the county criteria, and that's why we're here today for preliminary to move on forward. And it's gonna be the guy that builds the homes, he does a great job. He built my second house, and they're gonna be nice homes.
And Marty, again, my issue is not with this specific piece of property, and you're right. Each piece of property should be looked at it on its own. We have yet to see a cluster development, in my view, that meets what we were told initially when that was added to the code. We were showed pictures of, what would be the outcome. We have yet to see something that the outcome looks like that. That's my first thing. The second thing is, from a math standpoint, let's assume we have a 21-acre piece of property. We're going to put 7 homes on it. They all sit on 3 acres. Great. We're going to assess those 3-acre pieces of property. I would like to know what that would generate from a revenue standpoint versus a 21-acre piece of property where all the homes are sitting on 2-acre lots. And we've got 7 acres that will never be really assessed fully from a county tax standpoint. And so from a revenue standpoint, I'm wondering if we're missing out from a revenue standpoint, because it's just land that's kind of in all these easements, and it's not really being assessed as residential. It's not, I'm in my head, I believe a good attorney like Mr. Schaefer would be up in the assessment office, beating somebody up and saying, you can't assess this property like that. And so I think from a revenue standpoint, I think we're missing out from a county standpoint, and the budget's tight. So this property's fine. I'm gonna get my heart rate down, and we're gonna move on. These are conversations I think we should have around clustering and what we see. I'm just, Chris, I'm asking you to kind of listen, you know, what the expectations are, because we were told one thing, and the outcomes we're seeing, we continue to see the same thing over and over again. You know, something is going on in the application that's not quite right. And that's my view. I'm the only one talking, so I'm probably the only one that thinks this. So, okay, all right, let's move on. Let's jump.
I want to make one more comment if you allow me.
It's
Okay.
done, yeah.
One more.
I wouldn't worry about the revenue part of it. Believe me, the assessors can push that price up where they want to. However, my concern basically is I'm all for clustering. I'm all for allowing the maximum amount of open space when all these developments are over with. My concern is how much burden all these easements and all this monitoring puts on the staff at the county level. And you want to talk about cost, there's where the cost gets just enormous, trying to assess what these easements say and then trying to make sure they're properly administered. That's my concern, and that's something that in this whole process, we've tried to put a round peg in a square hole here to accommodate the clustering part, which is the main focus here. So if we need to look at anything, we need to look at all the stipulations that go along with it, and then who's responsible for those stipulations. When you have 12 different things listed, something
Robert,
falls through the cracks.
Just if I address one thing, when you refer to the clustering side of it, those 12 stipulations, if this wasn't a cluster subdivision, you'd have the same 12 stipulations.
Okay.
Just so the easements are the same.
Yes.
So it's a matter of, obviously, in the case of forested water resource protection easement, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but there is no maintenance side of it. You want it to grow up naturally.
But Marty, you'd have 12 different people then to deal with. You see what I mean? I mean, not 12, 7. If there's 7 lots, you then have 7 different people to deal with on all these 12 stipulations. Now we have one. I want to know how they deal with that one going forward. If that property changes hands 3 or 4 times, now I'll be quiet.
That's okay. I do think clustering comes in many different forms. When we have a huge tract and they cluster, like some of the ones that were down in the Freedom District, we do have more of an opportunity to do paths and all that, because it can be spread out to all the developer can spread it out to the homes as far as cost goes, the HOAs. In a smaller parcel, it's extremely hard and cost heavy, I guess, to do something like that. So, you know, it's for another day, clearly. We are passionate, as you can see, and do have some ideas, so.
I'd like to make. Can I have another idea?
Yes, you can.
Just to get on the bandwagon about clustering. I think, look, I get it. I get the revenue piece. I get the conditions piece, what Ralph's talking about there, all excellent points. I think, from my perspective, clustering, when lot yield is not changed as a result of clustering, what are we doing? I mean, the example you just mentioned about the development in Freedom a couple of months ago. Schools are approaching inadequacy, fire, et cetera, traffic concerns, which we're going to talk about next, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we said originally, well, I forget the exact numbers, it can be 150 houses, they're each going to be on 3 acres. Oh, we want to cluster. Well, does that mean it's going to be 75 houses? Oh, no, it's still 150. The acreage is just now going to be half. Well, what are we doing? And that's to me where clustering breaks down. And that's where I think Pete's frustration comes from, your frustration begins, and everybody's, that whole relationship with lot yield and clustering is the beginning of it.
Let me
Richard?
give you a historical summary of how this all started. Many years ago, when the clustering first came into existence, I was the director of the Recreation and Parks Department. We thought it was a great idea because it provided a lot of recreational open space for the county. And for many years, we accepted all of this open space and developed it with trails and things of this nature, all passive, not very much active, but on occasion some active. But it got to the point where we couldn't maintain it. And you know, when the county accepts it, we got to maintain it. And our department was just overburdened, the maintenance aspect of our department, that we started at some point, I can't remember how long ago, but it's been a while, that we're not going to accept this anymore. And this is whenever the problem started with, well, what do we do with this land, and who's going to maintain it? And will the public be able to get at least some passive, you know, trails or whatever? And so I agree with everybody here. I mean, we probably really need to look at this again as far as what happens when we cluster, because it's gotten out of hand.
Yes, what do we want it to be when we grow up? That's where we are, right?
Yeah.
We've lived with it, now, you know, let's reassess a little bit.
So if I may, I hear loud and clear that there are several commission members that are interested in the clustering discussion. So I'll talk with comprehensive planning and development review and so on, and we can lead a discussion and get into this more detail. We have a lot of things on our agendas over the next few meetings, so this may be a couple months before we return with it, but I'll definitely add it to as a discussion item for us to revisit, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, Matt?
I have one more question about it. You know, normally a remainder owns all the property. So if this remainder portion that's left can now be sold to someone else with all these restrictions on it, who pays for the liability of these 7 homeowners that now can access this property under these guidelines? I mean, as, you know, as a farmer, you know, I have to worry about trespassers on my property because they can come back and sue me if I give them permission or not, you know, but, I mean, you would think the HOA would have to own the open space instead of just being a piece of property that you can sell to someone else, but yet these homeowners still have access to it. And then who pays for the liability if someone builds a tree house in there and it falls down and someone gets killed, God forbid?
Well, that's something that needs to be addressed
Yes.
with the clustering,
Right.
the whole clustering thing. So we do need to look into it.
Certainly will, yes.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, I
I
opened up a
think-
can of worms. I had to say it.
That's okay.
I appreciate him taking the blame.
You get plenty, don't worry.
This hair's getting gray. I thought it'd take a little bit.
Thank you, ma'am, may I have another?
Okay. So we have, are you through, David? I'm sorry, I didn't think so.
Unfortunately, that's only half of the report. So,
Yeah, I didn't think
but
so.
I do appreciate all the conversation, and I'm glad that Mr. Hine had chimed in. If it's a concern, it should definitely be more conversation. My understanding is that the open space is more or less a blank canvas for whatever the community decides. If they want to leave it woods, they can leave it woods. If they would like paths or a park, I've heard both ways from citizens that say they like it and they don't like it. So I think additional conversations, they sound warranted. And Mr. Robertson, so for your concerns about the county easements on site, so you had asked if it's going to be bonded. Those county easements are not bonded except for the placement of signs. So there will be signs along the easement boundary that say this is a forest conservation easement, this is a water resource easement. If the citizen that buys that property is unaware of those easements, or the realtor didn't make it known to them that there are easements on the property, hopefully at that time they see those signs, they call in and they ask questions. What is this and what does this mean? And that's when staff would essentially do their job and be a public servant and provide that information. So that's the intention. If it always comes to fruition, I can't say. Moving on to the second half of the report. So this is concurrency management for Chapter 156. So with this development, we test for schools, roads, fire and EMS, and police. For schools, the affected schools was Eldersburg Elementary, Oklahoma Road Middle, and Liberty High. After running the numbers essentially for this, I'm not going to get too much in the weeds, but it is all in the report. So this development is adequate for police services. This development is adequate for all three of those schools. For fire and EMS, so I am going to get a little bit into detail for this. So the proposed subdivision is located within the Gamber Fire and EMS district. The most recent data from the Office of Public Safety for a 2-year period of September 2021 to August 2023. Late and no response statistical data indicates that of the first due total fire calls in the Gamber district, 1.33% were categorized as no responses and 8% as late and no responses. Of the first due EMS calls, 1.56 were categorized as no responses and 1.62 were categorized as late and no responses. So as far as no responses and late and no responses, Gamber is rated adequate for fire and EMS. Now, when you look at the response times for fire and EMS within the Gamber district for the same 2-year period, they had an average response time of 8 minutes and 32 seconds for fire, which is approaching inadequate. And with regard to EMS, they had a response time of 6 minutes and 42 seconds, which is adequate. So when the response time for a service is between 8 minutes and 10 minutes, that's when it is approaching inadequate. So because fire is at 8 minutes and 32 seconds, even though they're just over, it's still considered approaching inadequate. And then the other service that was looked at were for roads. So this is affecting Cherry Tree Lane, which is what it will be accessing, and that was deemed adequate. So with that, in regards to a preliminary plan, I have a section of code here. I'm only going to read a snippet of it, which is the second half. It states, if a public facility or service is approaching inadequate during the current CIP, the Planning Commission may conditionally approve the plan to proceed to the final plan stage and issue a tentative recordation schedule and tentative building permit reservation subject to modification at the final plan stage. So this project, it still has to go through the final review process, and at the end of that, once all county agencies have granted approval of the plan, it will be retested for fire and EMS, because those are, even though EMS is all adequate, those are essentially together, so they get tested together. But everything else will remain as adequate, because that's what they state now. So with that, pursuant to Chapter 156, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conditionally approve the preliminary plan with conditions as follows. Police, schools, roads, and EMS are considered adequate. Fire is considered approaching inadequate. The building permit reservation is for 4 lots in fiscal year 24, subject to modification at the final plat stage. The recordation schedule requires the plat be recorded within 24 months of preliminary approval, and the building permit reservation is allowed to roll over year after year until the sunset provision takes effect and the preliminary plan becomes void. So if you have any other questions not related to clustering, I'd be happy to help.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I just want to say something about clustering. I'm just kidding.
Okay. All right, so let me open it up to the public in case there is somebody here. Yes, can you please step to the microphone, speak clearly, and give your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Juanita Hayes, and I own the property at 4928 Cherry Tree Lane, which is the north boundary of this plat. My major concerns are flooding. We have had occasional flash flood warnings for that particular area, and the water will raise 4 to 8 feet. We have some serious erosion problems. There are springs further down that creek that are qualified as wetlands. And in terms of your clustering and park access type of thing, there is no way to get to that remainder lot without crossing that stream, and there is no good place for parking. So we have a lot of concerns about people wandering in from wherever who have no association with these houses. We have concerns about children that live there going down there during one of these flash floods and getting swept under the bridge and on toward the reservoir. There's a lot of safety, erosion, water issues associated with that lot, and what is the remainder really can't be approached without dealing with that stream. And that's our biggest concerns.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Aaron Berger here. I own 21 acres attached to Bradley's property, and 510 feet of it I've been maintaining for the last 23 years because I got approval from John Bradley, and it's erosion, which I have all the pictures that you've probably seen before. Now about the water problem, there is a water problem. You see a cute little stream right now? Well, as soon as it rains, I got pictures. You guys want the pictures?
I thought we saw them
Okay.
last go around.
You did, okay. So you cannot cross them streams, it's dangerous. I own a horse farm, and I don't allow my people to go down there when it rains. Now, the 510 feet, I have a severe erosion problem. Stan Pennington came out yesterday. He doesn't know why it's happening. Everything else on your plans are perfect, he said. But that hill, it's a complete hill that goes down very deep. So I came up, I talked to Janet O'Meara yesterday, I gave her an idea about this. I said, how about if it gets donated, that hillside gets donated to me, put it in land preservation, my farm's in land preservation, add it to the land preservation if it got approved by J.P. Smith. I would take care of the property. I have a lot of trees that are falling on my fence line now, and I've been taking care of that too. So that was a proposal. Now, you were talking about the other part of, just for the let's say 27 acres. Why don't you, my uncle owns Lou Fisher, which Marty Hackett knows. If that land is in land preservation, and you want to stop all these problems, add it to Pooldale Farms, and you won't have that problem. I'd like to see if I could buy that hillside or donate it, and then, you wouldn't have those issues. Then I would take care of the property, take care of the fallen trees, the erosion problem wouldn't have to worry about. We're talking 510 feet in the hill.
Okay. That is something you would need to talk to the owner about. So, but it sounds like it could be.
It could be for your other problem too.
Yeah.
21 acres. Donated to land preservation.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, we are back to
155.
The charge before you. To grant.
I would make a motion that we approve the plan as submitted subject to Chapter 155 and the stipulations listed in the staff summary.
Do we need to say preliminary approval?
Preliminary plan.
It certainly wouldn't hurt.
Okay, the preliminary plan.
Sure, yeah.
All right, did I get a second?
I second.
Okay. Any comments that we haven't already talked about?
I doubt it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I would make a second motion that we approve the preliminary plan subject to Chapter 156 and the staff recommendations included in the report.
Conditionally approved.
Conditionally approved.
I second it.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any further comments? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention? Any opposed? Okay. You are finally approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Is there
Chair?
any more discussion on clustering? I'd like to be part of that. I'll volunteer my time.
Would you stay till the end? I'm sure the guys would like to talk. So,
Madam Chair, if I may recommend, because all great discussion, but we did go a little bit longer than the 20 minutes assigned, to perhaps take a 5-minute recess, let everybody stretch their legs before we move on to the transportation.
Okay. What are we doing? All right, we are back in session. Hello, ladies. So, Claire and Mary, you want to talk to us about transportation?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So we've been before you many times, as you know, on this. About a month ago at your last meeting, you received the hard copy of our final draft of the Transportation Master Plan. That was posted on the website the same day, as well as the executive summary that you received. So we thought we'd give you a month to take a look at it, gather any questions. Most of what's in here you've seen before, with the exception of the recommendations. It's just all put together. We got additional input from other staff and from the municipalities to make some minor changes, but nothing that isn't just minor edits. So we'll just start with going quickly over the history of this, which, just to remind you, we started this after the 2015 when the master plan was adopted. This was one of the principal recommendations of the transportation element, to have a countywide master plan. Transportation master plan. Then in 2020, we engaged with Mead and Hunt to perform a corridor study. We met with the 8 municipalities on their needs and priorities. As you'll recall, 2020 was a difficult year, and that stalled us out just a bit, but we did keep going with that study, and it was delivered to you in the summer of 2020, but it was virtually. We worked in 2021 and 2022 to try to solicit public input. Again, we were a little hampered by some of the COVID restrictions, but we had surveys, the county website, we put kiosks in county buildings, we did press releases, we sent out mass mailings, and we did direct outreach to the towns and citizens groups, and then we presented the results of our surveys to you. And throughout that time, we continued our collaboration with the towns because it is so important. They're such an important part of this. So then starting last year at this time, the major elements of the draft plan, which were chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8, were reviewed by the Planning Commission at 14 regular meetings. You made some minor changes to those, and we've incorporated that into this draft. So the purpose of today's meeting is, you hadn't seen the background chapters before, chapters 1 through 4. Again, they're strictly background. Chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8, we did go over all of those, but there were some minor edits. And then what you haven't seen is chapter 9, which is the recommendations. All of these recommendations, however, were discussed in the context of those chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 as we went through them. So going forward, what we would be looking for is approval by you, the Planning Commission, of this plan. And then as we embark on our new countywide master plan, we will update it as new municipal plans are adopted. There's 4 town plans currently in process, and we've told them that any changes they make, we will incorporate into this plan. And then the ultimate goal is to incorporate this as the transportation into the new county master plan that we're going to start working on, or that we are starting to work on, as the transportation element. So this will not go to the county commissioners until they have it in the context of the new county master plan. So very quickly, on chapter 1, the introduction, which is pages 1 and 2, if you wanted to follow along with it. Basically, this is just pointing out that there were 3 major studies that went into this. A 2018 State Highway Study of Maryland 32, the 2020, again, work with State Highway Administration on a Maryland 26 corridor study, and then, as I said, the 2020 Transportation Corridor and Sub-Area Analysis that was performed by Mead and Hunt. And this was basically the basis for the entire Chapter 5. Chapter 1 also included the vision. We brought this to you very, very early, so I will read it again because it is important and it's what we based everything on. Going forward, Carroll County is a suburban and rural community where community members travel efficiently by automobile through a safe, well-connected, and functional transportation system. An interconnected network of state, county, and municipal roadways provides access and mobility for people and goods to reach their destinations throughout and beyond Carroll County and its 8 municipalities, protects quality of life through economic prosperity, and facilitates innovative and emerging technologies. So that is the vision for the plan. There are 4 goals, and I'm not going to read these. If you have any questions, let me know. Each one of these goals pertains to one of the major chapters. And I don't believe you have seen these goals before because they were sort of formulated as we went through the chapters, and I'm not sure we actually did bring them to you. And stop me at any time if you have any questions. So chapter 2 is one you hadn't seen. This is just basic demographic information, and we just focused on trends related to future transportation needs, population growth, age, household size, housing growth and values, income, education, and probably most importantly, jobs, employment, and commuting. Chapter 3, which is pages 6 and 7, is other transportation plans, and the purpose of this chapter is really to point out that this plan, unlike a lot of other transportation plans you might see, is just a road network plan. There's other plans in Carroll County for other aspects of transportation. There's an airport plan, a safety plan, our bike ped plan, and then there's all the municipal plans as well that have their separate elements. This is just simply a road network plan. So the last background chapter, and this is pretty much the whole chapter, what's on the screen, it's existing facilities, it's a countywide map showing lane mileage of interstate highways, state highways, county roads, and municipal roads by functional classification, and the table summarizes what you see on the map. I'm going to turn it over to Claire to talk about chapters 5 and 6.
Okay, so I'm going to begin with chapter 5, which is pages 9 through 41 of the plan. This is the transportation corridor and sub-area analysis, which focuses on near-term incremental improvements that improve local mobility while gaining some larger countywide benefit. So again, the MPPIs, or most promising potential improvements, identified in this chapter are the near-term incremental improvements that focus on achieving benefits sooner rather than later. So the long-term benefits are what we get into in chapter 6. So the MPPIs will improve traffic congestion, support economic development that is fiscally responsible and conscious of project delivery constraints. Priority was given to operational improvements, breakout projects, and phasing strategies that can actually be implemented in a 20-year time frame. So the map here shows the 24 MPPIs that were identified. And this map and the accompanying table are on page 13 of your plan. And then followed by more detailed descriptions in each of the 6 sub-areas.
And I apologize, that says chapter 6, it should be chapter 5.
Oh, yes, that's chapter 5 still, sorry. And then moving on to chapter 6, this is pages 42 through 64 of your plan. This chapter is planned roadway projects, and it presents the long-term or ultimate solutions to problems and challenges with the road network, and includes all areas of the county. Mary and I were before the board 7 times in early 2023 to discuss the state highway projects, the planned major streets, and the planned neighborhood connections as shown on this map. And the discussions were broken down by 7 sub-areas, and you can see that on the map, and then they're broken out further as you move along in the chapter. Okay. So input for the chapter and discussions regarding which roads would be brought forward from previously adopted plans included staff from the former Department of Planning and Department of Land and Resource Management, Public Works, and then staff from each of the municipalities. 24 roads were removed and 44 remain, either future planned major streets or planned neighborhood connections. And I will note, we added Maryland 30, the Manchester bypass, as a planned major street at the request of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The 44 future roadway projects were ranked using 10 criteria for a total of 10 available points. The projects were categorized into low, medium, and high priority. And the full list of criteria is on page 64. And you can, or the public or you, the full recording of the meeting where we discuss the criteria and how we rank the projects can be found on our webpage if anyone's interested. So starting with the planned major streets, we have 5 that are high priority, 5 that are medium, and 6 that are low priority. While all of these are considered necessary improvements and connections for the ultimate development of the county, certain roads are more feasible, will have greater impact, and more significant to the realization of the county's adopted land use plans. And then moving on, we have the prioritization for planned neighborhood connections. There's 9 that are high priority, 14 medium priority, and 5 low priority. And these are on page 64 of the plan as well.
Okay, if there's no questions about those, then pages 65 and 66 are a discussion of access management, which is basically defined as the proactive management of vehicular access points to land parcels adjacent to all manner of roadways. Access management encompasses a set of techniques that can be used to control access to highways, arterials, and other roadways, including access spacing, driveway spacing, safe turning lanes, median treatments, and right-of-way management. In this chapter, we didn't do a full study of the access management. That is one of the recommendations going forward, that we do need to work with SHA. And they've already identified 3 corridors for access management, 26, Maryland 26, 140, and 32, but they haven't been implemented in a deliberate manner, and that they are not legally binding. This was a recommendation from our consultant, and we're aware of it as well. So this, you'll see in the recommendation chapter, we have several recommendations regarding access management and further study. And then the last chapter before recommendations in any long-range plan, we felt it was necessary to talk about emerging trends in transportation. There's several mentioned on pages 67 through 70, but of particular interest is electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and what that's going to mean for road and even parking planning and other aspects of planning going forward. So transitioning from internal combustion engine to EVs requires adapting our lifestyles and the way we plan for the county, particularly the charging infrastructure. And AVs are in the preliminary stages of testing, but poised to have numerous benefits over and above those provided by electric vehicles. And there's a discussion of what we see as that going forward and recommendations for what we should further study. And this is a big area of planning right now that is being looked at. So this is definitely something we wanted to include in our plan as future study. So then, after that, we get to Chapter 9, pages 71 and 72, which are the recommendations, which came out of all of the chapters that we just briefly discussed. So I'm going to turn that over.
So, right, so pages 71 and 72, I'm going to, the PowerPoint. Okay, so our recommendations are broken into 4 categories. We have just general recommendations, and we have 4. There's Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. We have 16 recommendations. For Chapter 7, we have 4, and Chapter 8, we have 4 as well. So I'm just going to go through these, and you can stop me at any time if you have questions. So under general, number 1, continue to implement recommendations from previous adopted plans where they reinforce the vision, goals, and recommendations of this plan. So it's the Freedom Plan, the Finksburg Plan, et cetera. Number 2, adopt this plan and any amendments into the future master plan, what Mary was discussing, one of the beginning slides. As number 3, as part of the master plan update, use this plan to study the interaction between transportation and land use. Number 4, propose amendments to the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations that promote development, designs, and strategies to reduce congestion. So chapter 5 and 6, this is related to the MPPIs and the planned roadway projects. Number 1, advance the design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of planned roadway projects and MPPIs through various financing tools, the development review process, and partnerships. Number 2, design and construct planned roadway projects and MPPIs to improve connectivity, enhance safety, reduce traffic congestion, reduce conflicts between short and long-distance travel, accommodate all users, comply with the county's road standards, and maintain a high quality of life. Number 3, partial construction and interparcel connectivity should be the goal when complete construction is infeasible. 4, advance county road priorities through coordination with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council on the long-range transportation plan. 5, proactively work to acquire land necessary for the construction of planned roadway projects and MPPIs, taking into consideration funding availability in the prioritization established in Chapter 6. Number 6, develop a right-of-way preservation strategy for potential road improvements in coordination with the municipalities when appropriate. 7, amend this plan and its recommendations to be consistent with municipal plans, or municipal plan updates and amendments. Number 8, further analyze the feasibility of the county's alignments for planned roadway projects, which is actually something we're starting to do right now. Number 9, conduct traffic studies as needed to determine viable options to move traffic safely and efficiently through the county. 10, study the efficacy of traffic impact fees as a means to address capacity and connectivity improvements. 11, evaluate whether existing methods to fund transportation improvements are sufficient to expand the transportation network and to meet anticipated travel demand. Existing methods right now are the CIP and condition of development approval. Number 12, identify other potential funding sources for planned roadway projects and MPPIs, including roadway and intersection capacity enhancement, road extension, and road realignment projects. 13, investigate how CIP funding can aid in the construction of state arterial and collector roads. 14, partner with the state and municipalities to identify areas where development and traffic patterns are changing and therefore are in need of planned roadway projects or MPPIs. Number 15, continue to work with the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration to rank roadway and intersection projects along state highways and to prioritize and advance those projects through the annual CTP priority letter and through the update of the Carroll County Highway Needs Inventory. And number 16, continue to monitor and advocate for MDOT SHA's I-70 Transportation Systems Management and Operations Plan for the stretch of I-70 between Maryland 32 and 29.
And that recommendation came out of the consultant study because although it's not in Carroll County, the recognition is that most commuting Carroll County residents, even if they can get through Carroll County, okay, they get to that point and that's where they hit trouble. So we thought that was a good regional recommendation, or the consultant did and we agreed.
So Chapter 7 is access management. Number 1, coordinate with Maryland State Highway Administration to promote access management best practices along state highways by updating existing access management plans as needed, adhering to recommendations and implementation strategies in those existing plans, and identifying corridors in need of a plan. Number 2, request MDOT-SHA reconvene corridor level access management planning processes and follow through with those plans to achieve adoption by respective municipalities and or the county. Number 3, work with MDOT-SHA to develop an access management policy to implement current and future access management plans. And then number 4 is review the county code for obstacles to good access management practices on all types of streets to reduce trips and improve circulation. And then the last 4 are pertain to Chapter 8 emerging trends. Number 1 is provide countywide public and private locations for electric vehicle charging, analyze data to understand where we can locate EV charging infrastructure to be efficient and equitable, create guidance on how charging infrastructure should be located and designed, and consider requirements for level 2 charging infrastructure in new development. Number 2, educate the public about EV and autonomous vehicles and other new forms of transportation technology. 3, evaluate development review policies that may be impacted by the transition to EV and AVs, such as reducing parking standards. And then the last one, number 4, form partnerships with public and private organizations to implement EV and AV technology throughout the county.
So you may have noticed that some of what Claire said didn't match up exactly to that. We've been discussing over the last month, some of these are very cumbersome and not very understandable. So we're going to simplify, not change any meanings, but just, some of them need to be simplified and clarified, but saying the same thing. And I should point out that on our website is every meeting from last October, both the agenda, the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the video of the meeting, and has been added consistently. Was that on the last slide?
Mm-hmm. Were there any questions about the recommendations?
I guess I have 2 questions, and they both revolve around trends. The first one would be, with more people working from home, have we seen, or is it too early to tell, what has happened with, in terms of, we see a lot of traffic data up here where people are talking about peak time travel, between 7 and 9 or something like that. Are we seeing frequencies of trips increase during the middle of the day because people are working from home? And so, I don't know how that impacts all this, but that's a trend, and I don't know what to make of it. So that's just the one thought, and it's not really a good thought. It's just something I thought when I read it. And the second one is the from an EV standpoint, I don't really think it's is that something we should be asking? Like the retirement home we just looked at, we didn't ask about EV stations, but people are going to be driving out there. Somebody's going to show up in an electric car and not be able to charge the car. Is that something? I don't really see that as our. Is that our, or is that permitting? What do we do there?
So there's no current code requirements for that, right? So it's going to be best business practices. So if the assisted living facility feels that as a business practice to have those installed, then I think they'll do so. We may get to eventually the point where something will be legislated that's a requirement for charging stations, and then it'll be certainly something we would incorporate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
And the state is definitely, I think they passed something last year regarding that, but it wasn't far-reaching. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but, and in answer to your first question, through the UPWP program at BMC, there is going to be a study about post-COVID travel and what it means. The problem, what I'm hearing too, is it's changing a little bit now back because more
That's right.
people are going back into the office. So every time you study what happened last year, it might change this year. But that's why we want this to be kind of a
Fluid.
fluid, updated document until.
Right.
But that is all part of what we see going forward, is having to look at that.
I saw specifically that Baltimore City employees are going to go back 3 days a week, and possibly off too. So, so it is a trend that's coming about. Sorry, Jim.
I'm here 5 days a week.
Yeah, for a while.
Yeah, so I will just add, this is the Transportation Master Plan website. You can view the citizen outreach, the Maryland 32 Pell study, the Maryland 26 study, and then this right here is what you have in front of you, the final draft. And then if you scroll up, this left-hand tab is every PowerPoint, recorded meeting, and any additional document that we gave to the Planning Commission, you can find on this page right here. So that goes back to the very, very beginning, and with the consultant, Chapter 5, Mead and Hunt. Those are on here as well.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions?
Just curious, was there, and I remember the other 14 meetings, I think. Maybe I missed this one.
Yes, too.
Was there any accident data that was incorporated into the planning of where an intersection may need to be improved or road improvements as a result of that?
Maybe on a very small level, the consultant did, but this isn't a safety plan, and the county does have a highway safety plan that's adopted. So it really was looking more at the congestion issue than the safety issues. But some of them, it's hard to separate, because sometimes one causes the other. But no, there's nothing specific in this.
When I read through when I read through the demographics, you guys have a real challenge. We're getting older, household capacity or, size is declining. Schools are increasing, which is a little contradictory. I guess that's because of the growth up through 2010 and whatever else is happening there. Private schools are losing, attendance or whatever. Half of the county stays into work and half goes out, and that's a real challenge. So this is interesting stuff here. It's hard to plan for, but I think that you've done a great job with all this. I really do.
I do too.
Yes. Any other comments? Any public comment on the transportation plan? No? Okay. All right. Thank you, ladies. What do we need? Do we need?
Well, we didn't have it on the agenda for approval, so I'm not sure if the secretary is comfortable with it. We could always, we can post the most updated one next week that has those few minor changes I talked about, and then we can put it on your November 1st agenda for approval.
Great.
Yes, I think that would be, because we didn't post the agenda, right, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
That would be
But
perfect.
we won't send out a new hard copy till it's approved, and then if you
Okay.
keep this wherever you would keep something. We'll send it.
Suitable for framing.
Thank you.
On the refrigerator.
Okay. All right. We are going to move forward to bulk requirements in the commercial districts. Ms. Weber?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, yeah, still good morning. Okay. So here we are again, the bulk requirements in the commercial zones. Some discussion history just to get everybody up to date with where we are. This was first introduced to you all in July after it was forwarded by the county commissioners. We are seeking a recommendation on the language to the county commissioners, and just some refresher on your discussions in September. It revolved mainly around a maximum starting height in the commercial districts when adjacent to a residential district, grandfathering existing buildings, and then possibly looking at increasing setbacks, which would allow for an increase in height. So some background information before we get into our recommendations. Right now, the maximum height in the residential districts are laid out in that table. In the R40,000 district, the R20,000, and the R10,000 district, the maximum height is 35 feet, and the R75 is 40 feet. With that being said, you can apply for a height modification if you increase a setback by a half foot for each side yard setback is increased. You can increase your height by 1 foot up to 40 feet. So even though it's a maximum height of 35 feet, you can go up to 40 feet. And then the current bulk requirements in the commercial districts, our side yard is 10 feet, the rear yard is 15 feet, the front yard is 10 feet, and the height is 50 feet. So with that being said, our staff recommendation is to start at a 50-foot height maximum, because this is the maximum height achievable in the residential, the 40 feet, sorry, height maximum, because this is the maximum height achievable in the residential districts. Increasing the side yard setbacks from 10 feet to 15 feet, and this would match the rear yard setback of 15 feet. Grandfathering existing buildings, and then having the same sliding scale that we have in the residential districts, but this would be increasing each side or rear yard setback that is adjacent to a residential district by 1 foot, would allow for an increase of 1 foot in your height. But this would not exceed 50 feet. So to obtain the maximum 50-foot building height, the side and rear yard setbacks adjacent to a residential district would have to be at least 25 feet. So kind of putting that in text language, the proposed bulk requirements in the commercial districts when adjacent to a residential district, the starting maximum height would be 40 feet. The side yard would be increased to 15 feet. It is currently 10 feet. And then the rear yard would be 15 feet, and the front yard would be 10 feet. And then looking at the height modification that a property owner could request, the allowable adjustments to a bulk requirements for commercial districts when adjacent to a residential district, the maximum height could be 50 feet, the side yard would be 25 feet, the rear yard would be 25, and the front yard would be 10 feet. So that's it for my presentation, and it's up for your discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen?
So the height change to 40 feet, that does not include any extension for signage or?
We don't include signage on, the way we calculate height is the average height of the building. So that doesn't include like a pointed roof, a signage, it's the average height of the building from the ground to the roof.
So if there was a parapet that concealed mechanical equipment, that would not be included, it would be the
It would be
roof line,
included
drip
in the
line.
calculation of the average, but that's not the maximum height
Okay,
that's taken.
okay.
I would just say it kind of looks like the compromise we were hoping for, in my opinion, anyway.
I agree.
I'll say that I was shooting something closer to 35. And the reason for that was, I'm thinking, again, when you visualize 15 feet, I mean, guys, if we're, these are 2 foot square, I think, above us. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's, 15 feet's not a lot when we're talking about a residential property. And so 35 feet, and again, let's go back to that previous slide, if you would. Can you go back to that previous slide for us? One more. So we're working off of the R 7500, which is, again, that's a 40-foot, that's a 3-story home. I don't know, guys. I was thinking 35 feet was the number, because again, when you think of commercial development, let's think of a 10-foot story, 10-foot floor to ceiling. You've got, you know, a 2-foot plenum where they put the mechanical equipment and the wiring. You got the thickness of the floor. That's not quite a 3-story building, but it could be. You could get it in there. You know, with a flat roof. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Can you say that again? Give me your dimensions.
So you got 10 feet from floor to ceiling.
Right.
You got a
And
2-foot. You got a 2-foot plenum where they run the mechanical.
Right.
Okay. So then you got the thickness of the floor itself. If it's concrete floor, that's going to be a 1/2 foot. Then you got, you know, again, 10 feet. You got the 2-foot plenum, which 8-foot ceiling. So we can get a 30-foot. You can get 3 floors in 35 feet. We can get a 3-story commercial building in 35 feet.
Stephen?
Actually, with today's construction, you're not even getting 2 feet. If you have 35 to 40 foot, they're probably going to put a 4-story building in there.
That's up.
I mean, honestly, the spaces that we get now to try and fit ductwork, plumbing, sprinkler pipe, all that stuff, I mean, and everything is BIMmed. And when I say it's down to the inch, I mean, it's, if you, like I said, if you have 35 or 40 foot, they're doing everything they can to get 4 stories out of that, and they can probably make it happen. And plus now with everything being post-tension, they'll do a post-tension slab. So your slab's gonna be inches thick.
It's not going to be 6.
It's not even gonna be that, because it's gonna be all post-tension. So it's, with modern building techniques, it's absolutely amazing what they can do with these commercial buildings. I mean, that's the world I live in. I mean, it's amazing what they can do with just a little bit of height. Like I said, if you see 35, 40 foot, you're putting at least a 4-story building in there, because you can make it work. And the thing is too, is most of these buildings, you go down to like if you go into DC, for example, you have 10 foot from slab to slab. So you don't even have 10 foot to your ceiling. You might have 8 feet to your ceiling, 9 foot.
That's right.
And then same thing, you're shoehorning everything in above that, because it's all about maximizing floor space. And they're gonna do that if they can.
So when we think about this and we think about scale, and we think about, you know, it's a bedroom community, what's
So we're
appropriate?
looking county.
That's right. We're looking for the county.
Right.
That's right. And so, you know, what makes sense? I'm thinking 35 should be the number. You know, somebody wants to go higher, they can always, they can apply for a variance. That's always an alternative. But it gives us the purview to say, okay, so what kind of homes are next to it? You know, how far away are they from the property line? It allows us to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But what's the minimum? I think it should be 35.
So if I may, just to clarify,
Yes, sir.
when you mentioned variance, that variance would go before the zoning administrator. It would not necessarily come before you all. So just to clarify that.
Okay.
Richard, do you, no?
I agree with the 35 feet. You know, it's simple, it's not, you know, not changing with the side dimensions and all that stuff. It's like Stephen said, you can get everything you need in there. within that 35 feet.
And especially now, especially with your HVAC, it's so much more efficient. The technology's there. We used to require 36-inch duct. Now your duct is cut in half, so you don't. And I'm not saying that it will, but if a developer's building a building, they're going to do everything they can to maximize floor space. Because the more floor space you have, the more leasable square footage you have.
So if the engineers have adapted, why can't we? So if we're helping to protect the existing neighborhoods, which is my main focus here, and that's our goal, you just have reinforced the idea that you can go down lower and still achieve maybe what the builder wants or is looking for. Why not push that down and be compatible with what you just told us? I agree that we should lower that height. Concerned about the neighborhood.
Michael, anything?
Yeah, what Stephen just said, that's really good to know. And if we can satisfy the builder and satisfy the neighborhood, why not lower it down to 35?
Commissioner, any thoughts?
No, I mean, obviously, it's been a point of discussion here today, and it's been one outside of here, whether it be to us directly as the Board of County Commissioners. Obviously, it was mentioned they could obviously apply to modify that if need be. They do have that option. To me, it's something that, given the criteria of what the neighboring homes may be, it's probably more apt, in my opinion, to be more conservative in that sense and go with that. That would just be my thoughts.
I need to ask a question about the variance, though. So if a builder comes in and asks for that variance to say to 40 feet, what's the recourse to the residents then if the administrator, the zoning administrator, allows that variance to move forward? Then what's the recourse for the neighborhood or the where can they go?
They would appeal that to the Board of, the BZA, Board of Zoning Appeals, who would make a decision. And if the BZA upholds the zoning administrator's granting of the variance, then they can appeal that to the circuit court and all the way on up.
Just want to clarify that.
My only comment would be is, you know, if it's adjacent to an R7500, then the houses beside it could be taller than the commercial building, which really doesn't make sense. So, I don't know. I think you have to be 40 feet. I think the variance of, you know, of setting a guideline and put a hard number is way easier for a developer to come in to try to do something than to just say, well, it's gonna be up to the zoning administrator. Because then they spend a lot of money to go to court, basically.
Yep.
I mean, that is a good point, and that, I mean, if we look at the R7, that's why we put it up to 40.
Right.
Because it's not gonna really interfere.
That's right. I see that, yep.
I mean, and I think the main corridor we're talking about obviously is, you know, Liberty Road 26, and maybe I am or am not allowed to say this, but you know, I was born and raised in Anne Arundel County, and that corridor just now just reminds me so much of Ritchie Highway just being overbuilt, and you're just slamming everything you possibly can in there. And I think a lot of people come to Carroll County because they want to get away from that. And I think if we just allow these big old buildings to just, because that's the magic corridor right there. I mean, it always is.
Well, I will say, we are looking at the
For the county
entire
as a whole.
county.
Yeah, and I know we are, but I,
And while that's the one that's been most in question recently, there are definitely some others that have higher. So I think we do even need to look, if we're 35 feet, do we stay with 10-foot side yards? If we're 40 feet, do we go with the 15? So I know you all want an answer, but we may not have it.
So, I mean, while we would appreciate consensus and an answer, we can record the discussion, and ultimately, this is up to the Board of County Commissioners to make a decision as far as what the code change may or may not be. So we can certainly record that there was opinion both for 35 and for 40 feet, and leave it up to the county commissioners to make that ultimate decision. I would also ask the question, though, as far as what your thoughts are on the allowance for the sliding scale. So whether it be starting at 35 or starting at 40, allowing an increase when you increase the setbacks. I mean, what are the thoughts of the commission
Can we go
regarding that
back to
option?
that next page, and I appreciate that.
I mean, personally, I like the sliding scale, at least so that zoning administrator has some kind of boundary that, okay, he's not gonna build a 50-foot high building 10 foot away, you know. I like that we went to 15 feet, because I think that gives fire room to get around a building if there would be some kind of fire or something.
So just to clarify, so if the code were to be revised to have a sliding scale, that would not be a variance. That would be something that the developer could propose out of the gate and would not need a variance. The variance would be required to exceed the maximum. So if they wanted to go higher than 50 feet, then they would need that variance. Or, if 40 feet is the start and they want to go more than 40 feet without increasing the setbacks, that would be a variance. If they increase the setbacks, they could, with what's proposed, they could go up to 50 feet. If they wanted to go more than 50 feet, that definitely would be a variance, because we would not have an allowance for that in the code. That all makes sense.
So if they apply for a variance, then the landowners that border the residential people then would be informed by the administrator considering a variance, so they would have time to react to that.
Yes, absolutely. And then, as Mr. Allman stated,
BZA meeting.
so this would not be a BZA variance request. This would be the zoning administrator can make an administrative variance on this. If he makes a decision and citizens had an issue with that, they could take his decision to the BZA and appeal that at the BZA.
And furthermore, since this would be an administrative adjustment, since it deals with height, those citizens can request a public hearing, so it's not just the zoning administrator getting the variance application, saying yes or no. It would be that decision after a public hearing where the neighbors or whomever would have an opportunity to testify.
Yes.
So I know it's hard to do this, but I do think topography can have a huge play in the heights. Looking at a couple buildings that have been built, are being built, it seemed like they were lower, and all of a sudden they're up. So now the building is going to be way up there. And honestly, the hospital, the Atlee Ridge, what we saw on paper never prepared me for that huge building when you come up over 32. So I think there's other things to look at. I don't know how we could reasonably incorporate that.
Yeah, that would be extremely difficult to codify.
Right.
But it's certainly something that when it comes before you all, if you're looking at renderings and so on as community impact, it's something that you could look at.
Okay, so
Yo,
where are we?
I would make a motion if you'd let me, but my motion would be that we change that to 35. And my rationale for this is everything our county produces talks about how we are a rural county, and we're doing so many things right. But then when it comes to managing growth in our high growth areas, there are some genuine concerns by the people who live there and have their primary residences. I mean, it's their primary asset. we really need to protect those people in some way. And I think by softening this just a hair and allowing for those adjustments, you know, by increasing that side yard, I think we've done that. I think we've protected them. And I think how many 4-story buildings are there along 140 and 26 and 32? There aren't many. So a 4-story is, that's a substantial building for this county. And again, through the variance process, this can be done. So my motion would be that we change that to 35, we allow for the adjustment, and that we send this up to the Board of County Commissioners. That would be my motion. Y'all can discuss it, and if there's no second, I'm done.
By adjustment, do you mean the sliding scale?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
So, and actually, I have one more clarification also to ask, sorry. When you say a sliding scale, right now, the sliding scale is from 40 to 50, with 50 being the absolute maximum. What my understanding is you're saying lower the 40 to 35.
Yes, sir.
Would the upper scale still be 50, or did you want to reduce that?
I'm fine with 50.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you.
And the decreased side yards. Yes, ma'am?
Grandfathering, existing
Yes, ma'am.
buildings?
Definitely have to grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm curious, how tall is the county office building?
Good question. I would say probably at least 40 feet.
It is.
Yes, because if you think, I mean, we're 3 stories.
Plus the basement.
Plus the basement, 4 stories, plus you have all the equipment that's on top and the partitions that block it and so on. I'm thinking we're closer to 50 feet.
I realize this is city, but.
And we
Still-
actually talked about that this from a discussion perspective, that if we were looking for an example, again, this is, like I said, this is city, but this building is a 50-foot building immediately adjacent to residential.
Okay. All right. So, any other comments?
I would second what Peter said about just moving it down to 35 and then increasing the sliding scale to still go to 50.
Okay. So at 35, is that 15-foot
15-foot
side yard?
yards. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right, you all have that. So, okay. And we're forwarding it to the county commissioner.
We're done with it.
Right.
If we pass this. If not, I guess she's got to come back. We just love you
One
so
more
much.
time.
We love you. Come on, baby. Bring it in. Bring it.
Okay, so I skipped a step. I'm looking out. I see, yes, I see you guys. So before we make a vote,
Yeah.
I would ask for public comment. And our clock, I don't think, appears to be working, so,
I've got a timer. I will.
okay. The secretary.
Hi, Nancy Lynch, 6503 Carroll Highlands Road. I would also ask that you look at the setback requirement closer. 25 feet is nothing. I know we're not using the 6 properties that you showed us 2 months ago as examples anymore, but they were like 50 feet tall, and I don't think any of them were closer than 100 feet to a residential neighborhood. We are an old, established neighborhood. We've lived there 37 years, 34. There's people on our street who have lived there 60 years, and just like you said, that's why we all moved to this area. So really, I would think at least 50 feet should be from somebody's property line. Thank you.
50 feet, 50? 50? Yes. Is that what you said? From the front setback?
I believe it's from the building to the property line of the residential.
Okay, side, okay.
Side
I mean,
yard, rear yard.
there are parts in the county code that I've seen, 158, I think it is, that says this certain type of building cannot be closer than 200 feet from a residential property line. So,
Okay, thank you. Any other, yes? I feel like we're all old friends.
I know, we should go out for coffee afterwards. Audrey Novak, 6505 Carroll Highlands Road. I'll just be very brief. There's an adage, give them an inch, they'll take a mile. I really appreciate the considering 35 feet. I would encourage you to set it at 35 feet, because if we set it at 40, they're going to shoot for 50 and a variance. And I think, you know, it would be much more agreeable if it's 35 and they shoot for a 40-foot variance. And as far as the distance, when you use the county office building as an example, when you go outside, look at the distance from the building to the residential property. You have a huge parking lot that buffers. We wouldn't have that if the building had been put on the property near us. But thank you so much. You sound very reasonable. We appreciate that you are considering the residents as well.
Thank you. Any, oh, yep, one more.
Sorry, one more. Bill McCormick, I live on Ronda Road in Eldersburg. So something about the language I'm not too sure of, and you don't have to answer the question, I just want to put it out there. The language proposed was residential district. I would ask what's the difference between a residential district and a lot with residents. For example, I don't know how many properties in Carroll County are zoned conservation that have houses on them. I don't know if they constitute residential districts or not. Ms. Kirkner also raised the idea of considering the surrounding communities. So for example, a conservation zone lot that has a commercially zoned lot right behind it that might be building something that has a first floor elevation 40 feet above that conservation lot. If you stick a 35 or 40 foot building on top of that, you're looking at something that looks like an 80-foot building to those folks. Those are the only comments I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any,
I'll perhaps be the closing comment here today. So Kelly Miller, 73 East Main Street, Westminster, Maryland, 21157. First, I'd like to say that I appreciate the conversation about the scaling, and I've spoken with some clients who have no objection to the concept with the scaling allowance. I think, as you've heard here today, rarely do you see a commercial building that is built up to those setbacks just by virtue of the site design process there. I just want to point out a few things that I hope you will consider and that I will keep reiterating as it continues its way up to the commissioners for a public hearing. One of which is, what are the implications if an adjoining property gets rezoned residentially through a master plan or through an individual request? Does that create a non-conforming use if something has already been built to the maximum height and then the adjoining property is rezoned residentially? So that's just one thing to think about. The second is common ownership. I have a client who owns the adjoining residential piece and owns a commercial piece. Can he waive the ability for his commercial piece to develop higher? I think that still goes with the intent of the commission to protect neighbors who have maybe smaller residential houses, or I shouldn't say smaller, lower residential houses than have maybe developed on an otherwise R10 piece or something like that. But something to consider, because that is a real life example. I have a client in that situation, and I don't think it's the intent of this commission to negatively impact him because of a result of his own property that adjoins. One more global element is the architectural features here, as we've noted. I know Mr. Smith spoke to the size of stories, and I won't disagree because that's not my area of expertise. But I will say that oftentimes clients are looking at developing something with a little bit of architectural interest. And so therefore you might see roof features and roof lines that create the height higher than the 35 feet, and it's not a result of an extra story or extra leasable space. It is purely a design feature. And again, I haven't gathered that it's the intent of this commission to deter that at all. So I do think that's something that should be taken into consideration. I also want to briefly say that a variance is something that's available for people to apply for. It is an incredibly difficult legal standard to meet. So it is not a matter of just submitting an application for a variance. It is quite a difficult legal standard for one to overcome to obtain a variance. And so I don't want anyone to think that that's going to be an easy process for people to get over. The starting number is a real number for people, and I think that's how this should be thought of. So with that, those are my comments, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Anybody have any other comments here?
I think the intent, maybe rebut something you said, the intent of the variance and all, it's not to be made easy. So if the builder pursues a variance, the intent of that variance is to not make it easy, but to comply with what we're trying to do here. So that part of it, I have no concern about. There's certain parts of protecting communities that if it's harder, it's better. And so that's part I don't. The other part is with today's standards on architecture, I think just about anything is possible from what I've heard here. So if a roof line is about 3 or 4 feet higher than it should be, or 5 feet, again, if it's harder to make it comply, let it be so. And so that part of it I'm not going to be concerned about. I just a little bit of rebuttal. I don't want to argue about it. I just want to try to give you the intent of what some of these rules and regulations, how they apply. Don't want to make them so hard that nobody wants to move forward, but I think that if a builder is going to be a good neighbor, or an architect needs to be a good neighbor to the existing community, then they need to comply with our intent here.
I think we should be cautious saying that if it's harder for them, then so be it. We don't want to give an impression that we're not, look, it may not be a builder or an architect. It could be Richard, who has a building. He all of a sudden decides he wants to build up. So,
well, then I'm going to stop him.
All right. Okay. With that, I believe we had a long time back a motion and a second. We're through discussion, through public. So, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Then you have what we said, which will go to the commissioners.
Yep.
And let them look at the video.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, number 13, adult use cannabis.
Hope you didn't think the fun was over.
Yeah, I was hoping it was.
Brought samples?
Anywho, so
Or a product.
getting started. This was previously brought before you after the referral from the county commissioners. We didn't bring it immediately back because we wanted to look into the state law more and find out what other jurisdictions were planning on doing. So on that note, some previous information we received from the Board of County Commissioners when they referred it to you all. Their direction is to prohibit on-site consumption establishments, which the state law allows jurisdictions to do, and to restrict cannabis dispensaries as much as possible. And this was referred on April 20th of this year. So there's a lot of changes that we will be implementing with this text amendment, just with the newly passed state law. The first is in the definitions section of our code. We will be adding the following definitions to our definition section, and that's cannabis products, cannabis dispensary, cannabis grower, and cannabis processor. Also in the definition section, we will be removing medical cannabis dispensary, medical cannabis grower, medical cannabis processor. We'll be adding definitions for the Maryland Cannabis Administration, because a establishment must go through that administration to receive approval for a dispensary, a grower, or a processor license. And then we also add a definition for on-site consumption establishment. So also in the distance requirements section, we will be removing the restrictions of the medical cannabis dispensaries, growing and processing facilities. We'll be adding distance requirements to a different section, so that's why we're taking it out of this section. Well, oh, there we go. Okay. The next section we will make changes to is in the temporary and seasonal uses section. This is just to clarify that any temporary zoning certificate does not authorize somebody to sell cannabis products with their certificate. So in the actual cannabis section, this is where we will be establishing the distance requirements. So you can see the language added in red. Under B, for the purpose of this section, distance will be taken from the nearest point of the structure occupied by the use requiring separation to the nearest point of the structure from which the separation is to be established. A licensed cannabis dispensary, grower, and/or processor may not locate within 500 feet of a pre-existing primary or secondary school in the state, or a licensed child care center or a registered family child care home licensed under Title 9.5 of the Education Article. It cannot be within 500 feet of a playground, rec center, library, or public park, not within 500 feet of any lot in a residence district, or any residential lot of less than 3 acres in the Ag or Conservation District. And it also cannot be within 1,000 feet of another cannabis dispensary, grower, and/or processor. So I just want to point out that these first two distance requirements are taken directly from the state. They have the established minimum 500 feet distance requirement that you must meet. You can go above that, but you cannot go below 500 feet. So we obviously included that, and then we included any lot in a residence district, and then any lot of less than 3 acres. And then this 1,000 feet is also taken from the state legislation as well.
Go ahead.
The two things that you've added, is that in the code now for
Yes.
dispensaries now?
So the way our distance requirements are laid out, we just copied and pasted any lot in a residence district, and then any residential lot of less than 3 acres in the Ag or Conservation District. So that's just how we deal with our distance requirements now. So we wanted to add those protections as well for the dispensaries, since we took it out of that distance requirement section.
Okay, so, but that's current with the medical dispensaries we have now, so it's not gonna change anything for
No.
them?
Well, we'll actually be increasing it, because right now it's 400 feet, and this will be increasing it to 500 feet.
So if you already have one that's a medical, will he have to move if he's within that?
We don't have any medical dispensaries in the county.
Outside of the towns.
Correct,
That aren't
yeah.
covered by ours.
Outside of the town,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so I got a question about B. What's the rationale for that? Help me understand that.
It's in the state law.
1,000?
feet.
Yeah.
I mean, if we wanted to put everybody within 1,000 feet of each other, just so we could monitor it and control it better, would that not be a good thing? What's the reason for that?
I would assume just so they don't want them all clustered together in one area.
The exact opposite. Okay, I'm fine with it. I just don't, I don't understand,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's also laid out by the state, so we can't mess with that one.
That's right, the state knows, let's roll, whatever.
So just an example here, it says here about the ag and the conservation district. Is this one more use in the ag zone on remainder portion?
We will be getting to the use tables, but no.
I swear. Okay.
And then just one more piece of language added to the cannabis section, and that is cannabis products are not permitted to be sold in conjunction with a temporary zoning certificate, just reflecting what's in that other previous section. So here are the use tables, starting with the agriculture and conservation districts, removing the word medical, so it's just growing of cannabis, prohibited in both ag and conservation districts, and then removing chapter 158.040, which is the distance requirements, and then because we moved the distance requirements to the cannabis section. So then moving on to the R40,000, R20,000, R10,000, R75,000, 7,500, the residential districts. So facility for dispensing of cannabis is prohibited in all districts, adding the definitions to the additional regulations. We just moved this use because it was previously under office and healthcare because it was only medical before. So we're taking it out of that section and just putting it under the commercial subcategory in that use table. And then under the industrial subcategory, removing the word medical. So indoor growing of cannabis, obviously prohibited in all the residential districts. So now is the big one is the commercial districts. For starters, as we did with the residential districts, removing any discussion of the medical cannabis from the use table, particularly under the office and healthcare section, and creating these new uses under retail and service. So under these new uses, we will have a cannabis dispensary in conjunction with a cannabis grower and or processing facility, and then a cannabis dispensary in conjunction with an on-site consumption establishment, which as you can see is prohibited in all districts. So what we did is we are just mirroring what we had for the medical dispensaries and just mirroring it for the adult use as well. So previously, the medical dispensaries were permitted in the C2 and C3. It is now permitted in the C2 and C3 for adult use and medical dispensaries. Cannabis dispensaries in conjunction with a cannabis grower and or processing. For medical, it was previously permitted in the I1 and I2. We are again mirroring that in the I1 and I2 for adult use and medical growers and or processors. And then reiterating that we are eliminating, prohibiting the on-site consumption establishments as instructed by the county commissioners. And then under manufacturing and production, removing medical from indoor processing of cannabis, not changing any of the usages in the use table. So it was permitted before, it'll still be permitted now. Indoor growing of medical cannabis, again, removing the word medical and keeping the usage permitted as it is now for medical. And then under the additional regulations, you can see that we added 158002, which is the definitions, 158048.01, which is the temporary and seasonal uses, and chapter 158059, which is the cannabis section specifically. Do you have any questions?
I do. So in the sale of real estate, sometimes you encounter some stuff in individual homes. Did any of that apply to somebody, like not a dispensary, but just for their own enjoyment, growing marijuana in their backyard?
Under the new state legislation, Jim.
No, this is just, that's not really a zoning issue for the county. So, I mean, someone doing that in their backyard is, able to do that up to the legal limit.
She's just asking for a friend.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
And what is that legal limit, do we know?
Is it 2 grams or something?
I think it is.
2 grams, I believe, is the legal limit civilly now. So anything above that, it would be criminal possession.
Doesn't it have to be indoors? I don't think you can grow.
It does have to be indoors. Yeah, you can't
grow
just
private
grow
property.
it. Legally, you can't just grow it in your backyard. But
Really?
But it's not a zoning thing.
But again, this is not a zoning thing. That's a that's
legal.
That's not an issue that we're going to want to tackle with Chapter 158.
Right up against my field. He's got 2 nice plants.
It is.
I mean, really nice. I don't know what a nice plant looks like.
Okay.
But they look
All right,
really nice.
I'm done.
Not yet.
So if I may, I will say that we certainly anticipate there being a lot more state legislative discussion on this in the upcoming legislative session. Our goal here was to set some guide rails in place because the currently you cannot apply for a new license, and as Hannah mentioned, we do not have any in the county that this code would apply to. However, those applications, I believe, will open up in November or December for new licenses to be issued. April timeframe is my current understanding. I may be off on the dates, but so new licenses will be coming. So what we wanted to do was get some guide rails in place that we could all agree to, and then as the state legislation evolves and more clarity is brought about, then we would be at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners revisiting certain aspects of that. So our main intent here was simply get rid of the medical definition, clarify that it's adult use, and we did increase the setback requirement to match the state law, which is the 500 feet. So that's our current intent. Certainly open to discussion if you want to try and propose additional requirements, but without more clarity from the state, we're not sure how that will pan out. Because the state does have requirements that while we can pass our own zoning requirements, they cannot be onerous. So if, for example, you wanted to increase the setbacks to 5,000 feet, then it would essentially be impossible for any sort of establishment to be in the county, and that I do not think would pass the legal muster. So, so that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. So, in your opinion, it's better to wait to see what the state is coming up with before we venture?
Well, so no, our recommendation is that we would move forward with these code changes because that establishes some basic guide rails to adult use. And then based on Board of County Commissioners' opinions after the state legislature, I would anticipate we may be back before you for additional changes.
Okay.
And if I could just make a comment real quick, I just want to follow up with Mr. Hines' points about that. You're looking at an opening date of November 13th with a closing date of December 12th for the first round of applicants. There's going to be 75 licenses that'll be distributed statewide, and Carroll County is looking at a total of 2 that would be within the county. So within that first round. The second round would be open after that, but the first round, of course, is social equity application. So just to give you some context of some additional information that I've been looking at.
Are you saying 2 additional? We have 2 now, right?
And we have
Well, those are in the city of Westminster.
Those are in the city of Westminster.
Yeah, 3.
So what you would be,
Adding 2 more?
well, you would have 2 that would be given per the social equity application by the state, that would be countywide.
County,
That would
yeah.
then fall under county.
Yeah, this map is to demonstrate with the distance requirements that we are suggesting. There are 13 possible sites where a cannabis dispensary could go. The stars represent what is currently in use. So we have the 2 cannabis dispensaries in the city of Westminster, and then we also have a cannabis grower in the city of Tawnytown. So again, there's nothing in the county right now. But obviously, it sounds like that's going to change. And this is also to show that increasing the distance requirements over 500 could be a little problematic in reducing the number of possible locations. But again, that's established by the state, seeing how far you can push the distance requirements.
Any other comments? No? Okay.
I'm not convinced that the state has their act together here, and at all. So I'm not one to kick the can down the road, but on this instance, I think kicking the can down the road might be the best option for the commissioners and for us until the state gets their act together a little bit more. This is kind of a Wild West show, if you ask me right now.
Right.
Well,
So,
I'm not comfortable with
Right, but-
any of these.
understood, but,
So-called.
I think we
yeah, but we need to establish something, because right now, current county code does not allow for adult use. And however, as the commissioner mentioned, there will be some licenses available and so on, and so if we leave code as it is, there will be absolutely no guidelines for it. So what we're trying to do is establish some basic guidelines so that when those couple licenses come through.
Okay, so since I'm so ill-informed on this, I'm saying this about myself. The city of Westminster can do what they want, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Pawnee Town can do what they want.
Yes.
The county doesn't have to do anything yet, right?
No,
So there's still opportunity for the two open areas for what do you call it, minority and?
Social equity.
Social equity, I gotta get my phrases correct in this day and age. So the social equity could still be moved forward in all those areas that doesn't affect the county.
Yeah,
Correct?
well,
Be in the
but it
county.
would affect the county, because someone could, if we do not put these guide rails in place, then someone could propose a dispensary within 500 feet of a school, for example.
Right.
And we would have nothing to be able to prohibit that.
And we have no way of stopping that.
Unless we
Adopting this.
adopt this type of legislation to establish these bare minimum requirements.
I see where you're coming from, Chris. I just,
Which we've just copied and pasted from the state statute.
Right.
until they change it.
Correct.
Again.
That's correct.
Again and again.
If they do, of course, you know,
Okay.
sort of a living thing.
All right, before I guess, put it out to decide what you all want to do, any public comments? Okay.
Sorry, I apologize for you all having to listen to me again. So there was use not allowed within 500 feet of any residential lot of less than 3 acres in Ag or Conservation District. So if I'm understanding that correctly, if I have a conservation zone lot that I live on with kids, there are no restrictions. So I'd just like to make that comment. Thank you.
It's under 3 acres. I'm sorry, just to clarify, but if the lot is under 3 acres, then the setbacks would apply.
If it's 3 acres.
If it's 3 acres and larger, correct, then they would not apply.
Which is in the existing code. That was
Yes.
pulled out of
Existing.
58040. That's current code.
Okay,
I mean, you could make it more, but that's current code.
so do we need to put forth what is being recommended for the commissioners?
Yes, if you are all in agreement with what we have proposed, then we'd appreciate a motion and approval to forward this to the county commissioners for discussion.
Okay.
I would make that motion that we go along with the proposed changes and pass that along to the commissioners to make the real decision.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? No? Okay. Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. So Ralph has abstained. Okay.
Way to understand well enough to give you a true vote.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're in the home
thank
stretch.
you. Yes, one more, which,
There's an opportunity there to talk about height restrictions, but getting high, sorry.
okay. All right.
Okay. The last text amendment on your agenda is regarding planned commercial centers. Thank you. Again, as a reminder, last year at about this time, a concerned citizen, Mr. McCormick, in the Freedom area requested that the board refer the topic of second-story residential uses accessory to planned commercial centers to the Planning Commission for their review. The Planning Commission discussed this briefly at your March 29th work session and again at the July 18th meeting, and staff was asked to further study this housing typology. So, just as a little background, a planned commercial center is basically a shopping center. It's 3 or more retail stores, service establishments, medical facilities, or other commercial uses designed as a unit and primarily served by common accessories such as signs, parking lots and walkways, and this use is permitted by right in all 3 commercial districts. Here is what you find in Chapter 155 regarding planned commercial centers, but what was referred to you by the Board of County Commissioners was just regarding the residential component. So I've highlighted a second-story accessory use can be included, which you're all very familiar with, provided the structure is not more than a total of 2 stories. Residential units may be provided on the second story of a structure. No residential use is permitted on the first floor, and there are floor area restrictions on that. So we've spent the last couple months discussing possible amendments. The first one we brought to you, we let you know what we thought about this in July, which was to delete this allowance of accessory dwellings in planned commercial centers altogether. But from our perspective, that is not consistent with the housing goals in the 2014 master plan or the 2018 Freedom Plan calling for more diverse housing, and it's in conflict with state goals for housing. We looked at adding specific site requirements where this might be appropriate, and we examined some locational requirements, but basically it came down to if the property is already zoned commercial, we couldn't think of any additional requirements that we would impose. We had a long discussion, and we had that with you in July as well, about design guidelines, but our recommendation is that these are difficult to interpret and enforce because they're usually subjective. You may provide specific directives relating to location and design of all site improvements at the concept plan review and ensure consistency with the master plan. Site amenities specific to the residential use, such as dedicated parking and recreational open space, may be included in that directive. So that is not something we're recommending because you already have that authority. We also looked at imposing a minimum lot size requirement, but we really didn't think that would solve the perceived problem for commercial use. And then we talked about changing it from being accessory to a conditional use, which adds the additional step of BZA approval. But again, it's unlikely to result in a denial by the BZA given the constraints of Schultz v. Pritz. So our staff recommendation is no change to the existing code. Our feeling is accessory dwellings respond to a recognized need for more diverse housing. There are limitations currently in the code that there can be no more than 600 square feet and no less than, and no greater than 1,000 square feet, and they shall not exceed 50% of the total area of the PCC. And I think most importantly, the Planning Commission, upon the advice of DARC and staff, currently has the discretion to impact site and development design. This directive should be clear and concise, provided to the developer and staff at the concept plan review. And that is our recommendation.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there any way, one of the issues with that property was, of course, I was new and I didn't make any comments at the initial meeting. But also, the one thing I really didn't like about it was the lack of interconnecting sidewalks and crosswalks to adjoining commercial and, the schools across the street. Those kind of things made me say that this is a terrible place to have it. Is there any way we can add language that it's got to be interconnecting to the general commercial / industrial use area surrounding it?
So I would say, in response to that, as part of the site development plan, I do recall this specific project, there was sidewalk, it was extended after there were some comments, but I understand, like, in regards to the larger area. So, of course, in Carroll County, that comes along with development of properties, right? And you'll see it, you know, and there's conversation where we're going, well, we want sidewalk there, but it's sidewalk to nowhere. But then guess what? Like a couple of years later, it's connecting to something. That does happen, and that's just how development happens. So if we do our best per property to get, for you to get what you're looking for in terms of that, then the hope is that as the wider area develops and change occurs, that it is going to connect and provide that connectivity.
Because, you know, I know now that if I'd have made the recommendation at the first meeting of possibly moving the building farther forward so it wasn't such an obstruction, and they had the plantings up on the top level instead at the base of the berm, that the trees will never cover that building up in our lifetime, maybe not our kids either. So, just my comment. I mean, I just thought, you know, I think the sidewalks need to connect to something.
Yeah,
I do see a lot of sidewalks in Carroll County that connect to nothing and probably won't in my lifetime, so.
Can't go on somebody else's property, but it's not yours, so that's the problem.
I think this use has its place, and I would love to see some of it in our county at some point in time. I just don't think we're ready for it. And a lot of that centers around the fact that, again, we're a rural county. We are basically a bedroom community, and we don't really have the infrastructure to support people on foot. And frankly, those are the people who are living in these 600 square foot units that have already been developed. So, no, okay, go.
I'm sorry, I did give you a look. That's an assumption.
Yeah,
And-
it is. It is.
In the code, it does provide for parking, and you can have additional parking as well for that,
But the connectivity and the transportation that is needed with this, we just don't have it, Laura. I mean, and so, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So, if we're going to do this, and we're going to have, again, I'm not averse to retail on the bottom and office above. I'm not averse to retail on the bottom and residential above. But if there's a residential component, it ought to have, if we're going to invite people to live there, we ought to be able to support the people who are living there in some way. And I don't think what we are allowing to be developed supports those people very well. And that is my opinion. And I think also it is the community's opinion. And because again, these things are not something, I'm not sitting out there watching for this stuff to happen. This is just stuff that's being pointed out to me by the residents that live down in the southern part of the county where this stuff is taking place. So if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. And I don't think we're doing it right. So that's where I am.
So with this, I'm sorry, James.
I will say that in today's reality, people don't need a bus. There's Lyft, there's Uber.
That's a good point.
All means of transportation. And people decide to go into smaller spaces for a variety of reasons.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to pigeonhole that. At the same time, I am not proud of how we ended with that, but there are options for other spots within the county that we may see this in the future. It is as we talk about accessory dwellings, it is an option that allows that to happen for people. So I don't want to say, it's not going to happen in Freedom, because it could happen in Eldersburg, it could happen in Finksburg, it could happen pretty much anywhere. I know Freedom was mostly impacted by it, but we do have other areas that we look at, so.
So if we adopt the recommendations by the staff, no need to change the existing code, we still have some input, some at design, right? At concept. So that would be the time for us to weigh in and say, we want this sidewalk to connect to something, or we want this setback, we think the architecture needs to look like this, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be our role, given no change to the existing code.
Right.
Right? So, yeah, it's a sensitive subject. I hate to say it, but I think we got burned a little bit on the last one. Not fully understanding, but no, that's our role would be at concept.
I just know when you see these types of projects, because we do a lot of work like this, obviously in the city of DC, they're in more built-up areas where, yes, you could use Uber, yes, you could use Lyft, but you could get anywhere you needed to, a grocery store, whatever it might be, within walking distance, because they almost build, like we've done, for example, a ton of work down at Port Covington. That's a city within a city almost.
That's right.
And I remember what property we're talking about, but putting it out there,
It's 3 miles.
there's nothing there. So I understand while having to offer more housing options, it just, where they want to put this property, like, it just doesn't work there.
Well,
It doesn't.
I will say, this property is done. So we're
And
not
I
changing.
understand that, but then again too, because obviously that person took that right to the BZA, so we've mentioned it and somebody else mentioned it, we go with the inch versus a mile type of thing, and, you know what I mean, like this type of stuff, it just does not. Now, I could see it in Westminster more so, because the same thing, no matter where you go, you got the Food Line, you got the Walmart, you got, wherever, but
Yeah.
we just have to be careful where we put it.
Well, I don't know that that's totally up to us, because developers are going to suggest it for areas. I think we learned a lesson with this one.
And again, too, I go back to Harkinen where, I grew up, and I see it now because land in Baltimore County, Montgomery County, Howard County is now so expensive. So where are developers naturally going to go? They're coming into Carroll County, which we can't stop development, but land in Carroll County, what you might spend on 5 acres in Carroll County is at points in times millions of dollars less than what you're going to spend just by going right over the river to Howard County.
Yeah. Well, I think this developer that developed this property has been around for quite some time in the county, so he definitely didn't come, and I'm not saying that, if we could turn back the hands of time, isn't that the thing that we like to say?
If I might.
So.
Yes, you might.
I just wanted to make a couple comments. I wasn't here, obviously, for the previous topic you all are mentioning. As we all know, and I'm not taking any position on this, I'm just making some comments. I've had a number of people in the community reach out to me. We've all seen lately how our whole area is incredibly inventory poor. You're looking at roughly 100 homes, if that, right now available, whereas in 2017 you had over 1,900 properties for sale. I've had conversations with individuals that, they can't afford to live here. They want to live here, they work here, some are law enforcement, some are educators. They're moving to Littlestown, they're moving to other places. And yes, you do have some folks that want to move in, be they new teachers, which we're hiring significant amounts of. The challenge that I've heard over and over in the past 9 months or so, and definitely beyond that, is one, houses are now $500,000 on average in Carroll County. So if you're starting educator, law enforcement, fire, EMS, where do you come up with $500,000? Now, I'm not blaming any of us, but I think that's something we have to question and look at. And obviously, we're a diverse county. You've got agriculture, you've got municipalities, you've got all these different structures in housing. I just think the question we have to ask ourselves is, we have youth leaving. They're not potentially coming back. I know many people I've spoken to that have said, hey, my kids aren't going to come back because if it's $500,000 now, what's it going to be in 5 years? So I'm not weighing in on any specific point. And I agree with all the points that have been made. I just wanted to mention that today, given that we do have a big challenge. And I can tell you from myself and my colleagues, it's one we're actively looking at and trying to figure out how to bridge that as well. So I just wanted to share that.
Commissioner, it is a problem. It is a problem, I understand that, but if you just jump across the line to Frederick County and see all the, not only single dwelling homes, I'm talking about townhouses, I'm talking about apartment buildings, and their homes are still $500,000 more, even after they built all that stuff with all that infrastructure and all that traffic that comes with it. So Carroll County has a unique opportunity here to become the last county that has not been discovered until now. We didn't have a major road roaring through us, but we've been rediscovered. So we have to react pretty quickly to be strategic on how we do things so that what you're just talking about. Now, I was unfamiliar with all the ifs, ands, and buts of the Cleve Mill Road operation, but I know now where it is, and I'm starting to understand what you're talking about. So, it is a delicate balance, but even after all that, you go to a neighboring county, and after they've done all these things that you talked about, the homes are still $500,000. So is that our fault or not? No, it's the fault of certain economic situations and where we are in that strategic area. So it's a delicate balance that part of our job here is to protect.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a hard job to do.
And I agree with you.
And same way with Chris and his staff. That's a hard job to do, especially when you have all these outside forces saying, oh, Carroll County is the greatest place to live in the world. I agree with that. And we all want to come here. I agree with that. And if we keep changing things and ramping up the obligation of the county and the county government, then we're going to be what we don't want to be. So there's the crux of the situation. It's just a problem. But we have to be very, when we talk about being conservative, and I'm not talking about politically, I'm talking about being conservative in our approach of how we try to keep the culture of Carroll County what it is, as long as we can keep it that way. That way we're serving our citizens in the utmost way. That's just how I look at it. And I'm an old timer, so I've seen it when there was nothing of this around. And now I'm seeing this. I worry about Carroll County being rediscovered. We were in the 60s, and now we are again. But 60s gave us small lots along roadways. Hook Road is a prime example of that. That was probably the first really big time, house, where you could put 100 lots on 100 acres. And zoning occurred because people got alarmed. Now we're getting alarmed about some of these other things where you're factoring in economic impact of people we're trying to maintain and keep in the county. So it's a fine balance.
No, you're correct. It is.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand definitely what you're saying. We do, we have to have mixed use in this county.
I agree.
The standard has always been individual housing. And the previous Board of Commissioners, a certain commissioner on that, absolutely demanded that we just have individual houses. Well, we can't do that anymore. If we want people to come in here and live here, we have to have options, and that's what the mixed use is.
Right.
Now, I know there's some mixed use recommendations in the southern part of the county, and two big properties, the Beatty property and the Wolf property. And so that will help some of it, where you have mixed use, so you can afford a condo or, but you can't afford a house. And even with the mixed use, it's not gonna reduce the value of those houses. I agree with that, but we have to we gotta do something.
Right.
And,
Well,
so frankly, I'm in favor of these recommendations at this point.
we need
it.
We need accessory dwellings, which is what some of this comes down to. Not that it needs to be particularly, I think we just need to do a better look at where they're coming and what they're.
It's limited as to where we can actually do this.
That's right. And
Right.
the thing is, Janice, is if we have this in the code, we can say we need to look
Right.
better at where we put it. But the truth is, if we put it in the code and the zoning allows for it, they can put it where the zoning allows for it. So we can't really steer them closer to Eldersburg because, the undeveloped commercial property is the heck out 26. And so, this is it's a chicken and egg sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's not only Eldersburg. So it's.
But when we talk about undeveloped commercial property,
No, there's a lot out there. You would be
Okay,
very surprised.
I think we counted it up, and the majority of it was in the Eldersburg area.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, if I may. So this is definitely going to be a topic that's going to be covered a lot over the next 6 months or so. I don't know if anybody saw, there was a really good article in the Carroll Magazine about housing in Carroll County. In fact, I scanned it and sent it to a couple of people. I'll send it around to you all so you can take a look at it. It was a very good article. There's essentially a housing crisis nationwide. It's here in Maryland, and it's here in Carroll County. And part of that issue is, as was described by the commissioner, is that entry-level houses are $500,000. And to have a well-balanced community, you need to have housing choices. So I like going to Starbucks on the weekend, right? A Starbucks barista is not going to want to live in Baltimore City, where they can potentially afford, or up in Lewistown, and commute to Carroll County to work here. So if you want that well-balanced of commercial and so on with services and all that, you need to have housing choices for people to be able to live and work here. And that's something that we have a housing study that we're going to be working with a consultant to put together to look at the makeup of housing across the county and so on, and hopefully lead to some decisions on what changes, if any, should be made. So great points by everybody. This is absolutely going to be a topic for a lot more discussion moving forward. But our recommendation would be at this point, no change. Obviously, if you feel that there are a couple changes that you would want to entertain, we'll make note of them. But yeah, that's where we are.
So, I guess, do we have anything else anybody wants to say? I know Stephen has some meetings coming up.
So open it to public comment.
I got it.
I said the only thing I would say is I still think it needs to be somewhere in there. The commissioners can think about it. Some way that something like the mixed use has to be connected. Because, if you can say, you put a sidewalk in front of the nowhere, okay, now you're gonna build it and you're gonna have 80 units, I think, in there or something like that. And it's not gonna connect to anything.
Yeah.
And it's on a state highway.
But you can't
Stop
go on somebody else's property.
Well, I'm just saying that, okay, you can't put it there then.
Yeah.
Until there's connectivity.
I don't think you can do that either, but it sounds good. Is there any public comment?
Hi, Bill McCormick, Rhonda Road, Eldersburg, Maryland. There is currently one property in Eldersburg that has second-story apartments above commercial spaces. They are currently building another one. Previous staff members have called both of these projects mistakes. Previous and current commissioners have called these projects mistakes. The current project has not only already caused traffic problems, but has also caused noise problems as well as damage to surrounding properties, including ours, which no one thus far has done anything to remediate, by the way. While I certainly respect the amount of time that the staff has devoted to reviewing the code, the recommendations to keep second-story apartments in the code is based on subjective reasoning and questionable guidelines. First, they say that removing them would go against the county master plan. However, the reasoning given is that the master plan calls for different housing types to be available via mechanisms spelled out in the code. There are other avenues that developers can use to build more affordable housing in Eldersburg and the whole of Carroll County. Both denser residential lots as well as apartments are allowed elsewhere in the code. There is no reason to just bolt on some efficiency motel-looking apartments to accommodate a specific developer. The second reason given is that the code currently allows for discretion to be used by the Planning and Zoning Commission to shape and guide these types of projects through site and design guidelines as well as parking requirements. First, design and architectural review was specifically removed from the code for some reason during the last comprehensive rezoning. So quoting those as a reason to keep the code intact is a mistake. And while the inclusion of parking requirements as a facet of building design and community aesthetics is questionable at best, the lack of this commission's ability to apply discretion has not been illustrated more clearly than in viewing what happened with the last project of this type. One of you mentioned developers being a good neighbor. I would ask, what happens when developers aren't good neighbors? Not only was this commission flat out lied to by the developer, the commission's discretion was ignored not only by the developer, but also by the Rubber Stamp Committee, also known as the Board of Zoning Appeals. The outcome was that the developer gets what they want, and the appearance of the community is changed forever. And the county's response is a shrugging, oh well, let's just keep the status quo. I'm not here to argue against development, growth, or even mixed use. I'm here to argue against shoehorning specific projects into a community where they just don't fit, under the guise of adhering to some master plan and some imaginary designated growth boundary. If I'm not mistaken, the master plan also calls for things like smart and measured growth and conservation of our open spaces and ag and conservation land. To be clear, in the years that I've been arguing against a particular project, I've not once called for it to stop all growth or development. Hundreds of people signed a petition against the current project. Hundreds of people also signed a petition against second-story apartments. I'm asking that second-story apartments be removed from the code until a well-thought-out, well-executed plan for mixed use can be developed. You've got a chance here to stop future mistakes. Please listen to the community and do not allow these mistakes to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. So we have some options here. We can put it onto next agenda.
Our preference would be to come out of the commission today decision. And our recommendation is that there not be any change to the existing code, which the way that would progress then is that we would discuss that with the county commissioners, and if they agree that no further action needs, then that would stop this process.
Okay. All right. Who wants to make a?
So we make a motion to agree with the staff recommendations to have no change to the existing code.
Sounds like a winner.
Yes.
Second it.
Who said that?
As the alternate and everyone's here, you can't second the
You can't.
the motion. I'm sorry, I know. I hate to be a buzzkill.
I knew that.
I appreciate,
No.
the zeal.
Yeah.
Do I have a second somewhere?
I'll second it.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was
Aye.
that,
That was a weak eye.
that was a weak
That
eye.
sounded painful.
Did
I'm
you?
opposed. So you say it, I'll chime in.
I'm also, yeah.
You're also opposed. Okay.
3 to 2.
Still approved. 3-2.
Yeah, so it'd be 3-2.
Okay. And Steve and Pete and Matt would like to be noted that they oppose.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you. And thank you guys for, as always, you guys are really good. Thank you.
Now, Chris, just for my information, when you take this recommendation to the commissioners, will that include the fact that there was a split vote here and that there was quite a concern on moving forward?
Absolutely.
I would very much like you to note that. I know there's a commissioner here, but well, I'm not going to speak for him. I would rather speak to you.
Good
about
idea.
this.
Yeah, and-
It would be unfair to do that. But I would just urge you to say that this is quite a problem that elicited a split vote here, that we really need to start to look at some heavy-duty guidelines here based on what I heard from the public here also.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'll say, too, as clarification, I'm not against this in our code. I'm against the way we're doing it and not having, again, I know it's difficult, but if we can't do it well, I would rather pull it out or put a moratorium on it. That's where I am on this. I'm in favor of mixed-use development. I think it's great. I've done them. I just don't think we do it well.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
General
thank
public
you.
comment.
All in favor?
Hey,
Wait a minute,
Dennis,
Dennis.
we need general public comment.
Oh, yes, general public. Anybody want to say anything? Okay. All right. Thank you all for
Absolutely.
I'll make the motion to
doing.
adjourn.
I'll second.
All in
Thank you all.
favor?
Aye.